All right, good afternoon. This is East Lyme Board of Selectmen, special meeting for the purpose of budget review, East Lyme Town Hall, February 28th, 2024, at 5 o'clock. Just rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Okay, so the purpose tonight is to review budgets, and the first one is information technology. That's number 109 in the budget book.
You were on the camera, Mr. Clary. You what? Whoever you want to, yeah. You could turn that if you want. The idea was to be able to look at the screen, but so if you just want to, turn face down. Hold on a second. This is recording on. I don't know why this screen's not working, but
That's your.
there we go.
Split the monitor instead of clone.
Okay.
You've made two, so you can slide your.
So are they both going to record?
It's recording what's going through the camera.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Okay. We're good.
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 So I'm St. Clair, the team for the town. I started in October of 2023, so I just first year. Last October. So I've had some time to sort of sit back and assess everything and the state of where the town sits IT wise. And I think there's a lot of good. I've been working closely with Carmen over that time, get up to speed to utilize an outside service, Star Computers, who was sort of the primary before I started to handle things. So we've sort of continued the initiative of bringing most of all of the IT parent feeding back into the town. So under the IT department within the town. So kind of taking a step back from having Star Computers and an outside company do the day-to-day and even most patients. And I think that what that allows us to do is be better stewards of the town's data and infrastructure, have a better understanding, be able to better respond and adapt when things change or we have any sort of problems. And I think you'll see in the budget that we presented, there's a few increases, a few notable increases, and a few decreases as well. I'll go over those specifically. So I think where I've come up in any of my analysis is we are woefully understaffed. So if we look at the best comparison that I could find for something of this size would be a not-for-profit, say under 500, not-for-profit under 500 employees type of a business, would closely align to municipality, and within that realm, a ratio of about 40 to 1 generally what we look for IT staff to employees. So one IT person for every 40 or so working in the town. Now that number can be skewed up and down a little bit. It's indicative of a more traditional office space, right? So a building, everybody goes in, say there's 100 desks, everybody sits down, everything looks the same. They connect to one little server room in the back. There's one internet connection, one point of ingress and egress for all that network traffic. So very easily controlled. One spot here, very homogeneous set of devices. What we have in the town is a very much not that. We sort of have islands all over town. different buildings, different network infrastructures, different internet connections, different service providers for internet. And we have the police department and emergency services, which are sort of on their own. The complexity of integrating all of these is much higher than a normal business would have, right? So we have all of these town buildings that link back to here, that link to other offsite locations for backups, for redundancy. The police department connects to the state, all the state secure networks for all of their infrastructure. So we have two main data sets. We have a data set of most everyone in town. That data set resides here in Town Hall. And then PD has their own data center there with all their custom applications and all of that. So two very distinct networks. So one of the big increases that we're looking for here is the addition of another employee, another engineer, IT engineer. And that will be primarily to serve the PD side. Their needs are much higher per user than anyone else in the town. And that comes down to a lot of things. They utilize a large number of software packages, and every police car that goes out is its own mobile workstation with multiple connections, multiple network connections. The police officers themselves, they have body cams that record. All that has to go from their body cams to the car, out to the evidence repository. All the reports get uploaded back to the data center over at the police department. A lot of intricacy there when things go wrong. It's very, very important. So the additional person would give us a little bit more leeway to handle the requests and needs of the police department, as well as in the townwide area. So we have a radio antenna that runs around town that feeds back to the association, that feeds back to the police dispatch, and that goes in 20 different areas in town. So we're in a good place in that a lot of the initiatives that we're working on for cybersecurity, for user training, things like that, we have the money for, or don't cost anything aside from time. So what we're really faced with is a time deficit. People in our department, when we're looking for at that 40-to-1 ratio, right now we're at 190. What that means for the town is a lot of people waiting for the services and things that they need. So when it comes down to an efficiency standpoint, us being understaffed sort of reflects on the rest of the town's efficiency. We're not able to give them what they need so that they can do their work. Some things we have been able to streamline and reduce costs on. We were able to, excuse me, and I've been losing my voice over this. Hopefully it'll stay with me. One particular, our copier, we renegotiated our 5-year copier lease. Every 5 years, they, before I had started, they generally go ahead and just replace every copier in town. At the end of the lease, what we did this time is a more in-depth analysis of the actual use of the copiers, and we were able to see that we didn't need to replace them all. We owned most of them out of the lease, so we replaced some, added some to other areas. Get into the details, but we're able to save a lot of money there, and that number's not doesn't show the true cost, because where we were able to add copies, we removed very expensive laser printers, or inkjet printers. You don't know how much those cost to print out. So some initiatives in the town, aside from the copiers, we've been switching over the phone system. And
It's this room, I swear.
Waters.
It is.
water too.
Yeah.
So in the changes to the phone system, what we're able to do here is we were in a position where we were replacing a very outdated and very expensive phone system that was in-house. And the replacement cost for that was going to be upwards of $100,000 to do what we needed to do. Have an on-site phone system. So what we did is we went and we worked with Frontier and Ring Central, and we were able to do a cloud phone system that met all of our needs, and we were able to procure the phones for little to no cost.
Yeah.
On the phone side of it, and bring our monthly bill actually down within that, without incurring any one-time cost adding phone system. So that is done here for Town Hall, Community Center, and other town buildings will soon to follow. That's sort of an in-progress thing. So some money complexity saved there. See increases in almost every licensing line, and that just comes with addition of users. As we had people, we had licenses. Some of the licensing costs go up, some about 5 to 10% a year. That's pretty average. There's a big line that we moved over, which was comes under 218 communication services is what it's listed as here. So that whole line previously fell under building maintenance. And that is for phone lines. Phone lines, cell phones.
And void phones.
Void phones. The phones, for some reason, were bundled under building maintenance. Now we need those to our budget. So a decrease in their budget and increase in our budget. So that's sort of just a shift.
Under what line? I'm sorry.
It's 218.
218, got it. Okay, thank you.
That's what that com line is.
That's right. Okay, 260. Okay.
Yeah, so I think in the you see licensing generally has gone up across the board. So what I want is, at the end, as you hear all of these budgets, I think you're running through over the next couple of meetings. Every time you hear any technological initiative that any department is working on, we'll be a core part of that. So every single department is touched by what we do. So the more efficient we can be, the better we can help them to achieve their initiatives, their goals. And you'd be surprised how far reaching the IT department goes in this. I mean, we have payloaders that report how much dirt that they pick up and drop off so they can do it back. All goes back to a database that I manage over at Field Services building. All of the water meters, they come back to a database system that everybody goes out and reads. That's over all IT things. So we have the new transfer station that's coming. They're getting all cameras put in there, so they'll have a camera system that will tie back to Field Services and most likely back to dispatch as well. That's another cost saving initiative as opposed to putting in a full internet connection all the way back up in the transfer station. It's going to be quite costly. What we ended up doing is going with a 5G cellular cradle point modem. And, so basically use a cellular service there, which we were able to pull under our regular cell phone FirstNet responders bill. So it's a high quality of service, high speed, low latency. So all that whole building, the transfer station, all the cameras, everything will run off of cellular, and all the camera will go back to feed everywhere that they need to. So we're streamlining and trying to ease costs as much as we can, and really where our deficit is in time. There's a few capital items. So one is a continuation of the PC replacement. It's pretty standard what we had discussed. And the last budget was replacing in the 3 to 5 year range, and we squeezed that up a little bit to the 4 to 6 year range, just to be able to save a little bit of money there. And trying to get the machines to last a little bit longer. And the other line for capital will be for replacing switch equipment, communications equipment for the radio network. Primarily for the radio network, the switches are between 10 and 15 years old, so we're on borrowed time there. Not a huge expense, but something that needs to be done. In addition to that, there is another piece of equipment for the safety building for the data center there. A singular switch, which will allow us to increase our redundancy there. We already have redundant equipment, but this will let us sort of extend that some more. Right. That's all I have.
But they're very informative, I thought, you know, the interrelationship between all the departments. I'm sure everyone would appreciate that without you know, putting those connections together and how efficiency and IT works its way through to efficiency in all the departments. I mean, you start talking about, you know, we get trucks with the cameras now for the recycling bins and there's a lot. There's a lot to it.
A lot of these.
Can I ask you a question? Sure. So, in the item, new engineering request, I see that for selecting an effort to save costs, under slightly less, would that mean that that person would just be a part-time?
That was delaying us.
Anticipate November 1st start date. So it was 5 months of savings, and that 48,250. If you look at the support pages in the back, it's the police/EMD/FMO IT support line 221. That was cut by 48,250, and the line was additional support needed for 24/7 PD support.
In
This particular line, the 48,250 that we added to the salary line came out of this line. So the idea was we would eliminate the additional support, being that we have an additional IT person in the field. So that's where the money came from.
That was my question on line item 221. Is that what you're talking about? Okay.
Yep.
And also too, you had a significant increase on line item 218, going to 2025.
That's the 23,000 that was added from building maintenance.
Yeah, that's the.
That was just the money.
That was the phone. That was shift, a budget line shifted.
Yes.
Which hopefully we can improve upon that number now.
Quick question. No, Star, how much do we pay them? How does that work now? Because I know originally Star was kind of like 24/7. Have we cut back on using them, or what is their
So as of
role now?
as of this budget year, July 1st, we took over the 24/7. I took over the 24/7 support, so we discontinued that. That was a number that we had peeled off last year. And then we've been continually cutting the number down. It's not a number that we want to take out completely, because things do come up where we need an extra set of hands or people aren't around, especially with a small department. And it's been a good partnership. And if we need particular a project, things like that. So, but the overall numbers have been decreasing as we brought that stuff.
So do you pay Star by each job they do, or is it like a flat fee
So
they
we
get paid, or
pay a retainer, and then they work off of the retainer. So over the last 2 quarters, we do it in quarters. So the last 2 quarters, we've been below what we did, extra money back in that pool. Which again, if something happens.
do they give you the money back, or do you just roll it over?
Well, for this year, you know, we keep rolling it over, and we could potentially roll it to the next year. We're shy of the budget now. We have some projects coming up that we might need, so we might go up a little bit. So we won't know till closer to the end of the year what we'll.
Thank you.
And is my understanding correct that they had a lot of history with our system and
They
it's
do.
important
They do.
to have access to that? history?
Yes, they're very, very key to have involved. One of the primary techs there, has done a ton of work through the PDs that they're moved, and it was instrumental in setting up all of those factors. So there's a lot of complexity to it. So having them as resources is a good thing.
This, employees, do they come on site or do they work remotely?
A mixture, a combination. Yeah, for the last probably 6 months, the onsite has been very minimal. We tried that time built into everything. And we did lose, they lost one of their key engineers, was the primary engineer, our account. So just by
Hmm,
natural cause,
Yeah.
we've kind of been using less and less.
thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. Thanks for keeping us connected. Okay.
And thanks for emailing me back at 3 a.m. last night. I'll be with you.
They give them 2 or 3 computers, we can have one in each hand and one in front.
Got some downstairs.
Last night, I kept getting dropped from the server, so I emailed Dan. He responded. It was like 2 a.m.
24/7 operation around here.
It is. Which one are we going? Are we emergency management?
14.
Yes.
I'm gonna hit those 2. We have,
Hold on.
we do have
Not
a,
mine.
It's
printout, right?
Got the hurricane on the front.
it won't pull up. Okay.
Okay.
Oh,
Hi, I am Julie Wilson. I'm the director for the town.
Mike Nicholson, engineering director, keep place.
Thank you.
He's gonna want.
Julie, do you want to take the mouse?
Sure. Do you want a clicker? I'll tell you when to click. Good. You can get a clicker. Perfect. So again, there's some new members. I want to make sure that everybody understands what capacity of emergency management is. I know I have a lot of people in the public that say, emergency management, what do you do? You know, like they don't really know the behind the scenes because we are behind the scenes a lot of the time. So the first slide, the mission of emergency management, to strengthen community resilience and preparedness by educating our residents, businesses, and first responders about potential threats through, first would be public outreach during emergency events via social media, the town website, Everbridge emergency alert notifications, and community messaging boards. We also have increased public education and awareness about disasters and preparedness through social media, as well as through presentations for our senior population. We've done, the chief and I have done presentations at the HEPA buildings in the past, and we have another one scheduled in April at the senior center. So we try to keep the seniors up to date with as much information as we can, because we know they're not connected electronically like a lot of residents. Planning is another big part of what we do, reviewing and updating critical plans, as well as developing new hazard specific plans. In 2023, we developed emergency action plans for air quality alerts, since the New York fire or Canadian fires now that was blowing down here, and we're all breathing it in. And so, you know, it'd be nice to have a plan for that. Short and long-term disaster plan recovery, as well as standard operating procedures for evacuations. We're also worked with our IT director to develop a cyber attack response plan. And all these plans have recently been added to our local emergency operations plan, which was recently approved by the state of Connecticut. So we're good there. Planning needs for our vulnerable populations in regards to their needs for power, for medical equipment, or transportation for evacuations. Seeking funding and acquiring critical resources to enhance emergency preparedness and operational readiness. Conducting emergency drills and exercises to test those plans and procedures. Another big portion of it is training, education. Of course, as we all know, is a never-ending journey. We continually engage in training opportunities to strengthen our capabilities. I recently graduated from the National Emergency Management Advanced Academy from Fairfield University in 2023. Phenomenal experience, and I'm very thankful to the chief that, he's an open-minded, he likes to allow, his people to learn and grow. It was a great opportunity. I was able to bring a lot of what I learned back here to the town. Our department has been very proactive in developing trainings as well. The chief and I are currently working with multiple professionals across Region 4, and we're planning a full-scale school reunification exercise for 2025. We find that a lot of the conversation in the school safety regional committee that we are members of is the biggest obstacle they reach is when the parents show up to the scene and they're taking away from the resources that are there to try to, help the situation out. So, training everybody involved, the public safety people, the students, the parents, all at once. So that's something we are in the process of developing currently. And then, of course, communication coordination, continuously networking and making personal connections with local, regional, state, and federal partners. In the event of a large-scale emergency where our local resources are exhausted, these contacts are going to be extremely important. On top of it, mitigation, ensuring the resiliency of our critical facilities, addressing risks associated with aging infrastructure and climate change. We work closely with the Department of Public Works and with our land use departments to update plans with identified hazards, to include potential mitigation measures for such hazards, with the ultimate goal of reducing the potential for loss of life and damage to property and infrastructure. Preparedness. Continuous monitoring, planning for potential threats. Public health. As you all know, the COVID-19 pandemic was an unprecedented large-scale event. Our department coordinated a critical response plan to order, receive, and distribute PPE and COVID tests to our municipal employees, small businesses, and residents. We additionally planned and executed multiple successful COVID testing and vaccination drive-through events. Cybersecurity, as we all know, is another big issue in today's world. Chief and I are co-chairs of the Region 4 Cybersecurity Committee. Critical infrastructure government networks are facing increased threats of cyber attacks that could disrupt our critical operations. So we represent East Lyme. That monthly state cybersecurity meetings, as well as organize and run the monthly Region 4 cybersecurity meetings to stay informed and on top of what's happening. School safety. I'm the chair of the ESF5 Emergency Management Region 4 Committee, as well as the School Safety Subcommittee, working along with all of the professionals, municipal K-12 higher education institutions, law enforcement, emergency management, mental health professionals, all in one big group, taking a comprehensive, all-inclusive, all-hazards approach to school safety. So that's a very beneficial committee as well. And then we're faced with severe weather and climate change and yada, yada, yada. So we're always having to, look at what's coming and the frequency of storms and the severity of storms is definitely increasing. And so that's something that we have to stay on top of always. And then finally is the radiological emergency, where we perform our monthly siren tests. I'm sure you all love those with your dogs going, oh. And working with our command staff to hold our annual millstone drills for FEMA evaluated drills. Those are all important parts. Then we're on to the 2 more pages. With response. At a moment's notice, we must be prepared to provide a coordinated response to an active threat. we are ready and available for emergencies 24/7, 365. We prepare to activate the EOC with our command staff if needed. We're prepared to send emergency alerts to affected residents, work with the municipal departments for coordinated response, manage resource requests from regional, state, and federal partners when municipal resources are overwhelmed, manage and coordination of American Red Cross and the 5 surrounding municipalities for opening and management of the East Lyme Middle School as a multi-jurisdictional shelter. We work closely with our Eversource liaisons during all storms to ensure power is restored at a priority level for critical facilities and our vulnerable residents who have registered with us indicating the need for power for life-sustaining medical equipment. And also managing evacuation of residents when life safety is threatened. All right, this is the last page, I promise. Recovery is the final part of our circle that they work around every day. Recovering from a large scale event, we would do things such as damage assessments. For instance, after Storm Ida in 2019, I believe that was, there was a lot of residents who experienced damage, flooded basements, et cetera, et cetera. So we partnered with FEMA and the state and walked through, all of the damaged properties and collected all the information. With that effort between East Lyme and Norwich, we were able to garner enough to meet the threshold so that all of Newlyn County was able to get financial assistance through FEMA. So it's a very important part of recovery because, but again, it takes the staff. It takes the staff and the time to do it, which is why it was incredible that with only 2 towns submitting, we met the threshold for everybody in the county. Also working with residents after the fact with damage assessment assistance, getting them connected with FEMA representatives, small business administration to help small businesses that were affected by any kind of damage. We also administer that. Keeping the public informed of available disaster assistance, health and social services are very important after a disaster as well. Continuity of municipal operations, overseeing efforts to restore services and reopen any damaged public facilities, and performing after action reports, reviews after any kind of an incident to look at the lessons learned and implement any changes that need to be put into effect prior to the next emergency. So yes, we keep very busy. On the plus side, grant funding, we apply for every year. Over the past 7 years, since the chief took over lead of the department, we have brought in $661,350 in grant funding. And you can see the breakdown there on the slide: nuclear safety, emergency management performance grant, and the recent completion of the local emergency operations plan update for 2024 garnered us another $5,000. Onto the budget part. Now that y'all have a better understanding of why this is so important. Everything pretty much, the EMD stipend, is that? Kevin, you were, the 22,000, that hadn't changed and you were going to look into that.
It's in the salary contingency. We'll cover that.
All right, so that's good. All right, EOC staff activation remains the same. The communications director for the EOC and the radiological officer for the EOC have a regular stipend, and the increase represents a 2% increase for this year. Longevity shift differential for the deputy position, 17 years almost in March. Then the regular salary for my position. The emergency resources funding has been moved back to miscellaneous supplies because the resources we had been seeking in the past, which we had to pay for, are now available to us at 0 cost. So that's cool. Radio maintenance, there was an increase in the utility communications who manages all of our communications equipment. That had an increase. Let's see.
On the radio maintenance, it's important to remember that's for every entity in town. So it's not just emergency management, it just falls into this budget, but it's police, fire, EMS, public works, all of the radio systems that we, currently oversee. So it's, even though it's in this budget, it's widespread and it touches and affects all the budgets.
And we did ask for 45,798. It got reduced to 43,125. We took it from the townwide camera equipment and repairs because cameras are new. So we're hoping that everything, flies fine and falls under warranty and maybe next year we'll add that back in. Telephones will remain the same. Or is actually what we requested. There is obviously the regular expected increases in the typical services. Training, we asked for 1950, it was reduced to 1800. So we'll have to just take that out of the conference fees or whatever. We'll make it work. Transportation allowance, I had asked for an increase in that because I've been attending a lot more regional meetings, trainings, et cetera, et cetera. I'm doing a lot of miles on my car, which we'll talk about during the CLP. And miscellaneous supplies, just the general increases for cost of everything involved, and I've had that all broken out in the miscellaneous supplies section. A lot of it includes part of it is the VOC emergency management software that we recently acquired. The Everbridge notification for 7,500 for emergency alerts, that's part of that big chunk. And then the rest of it's just general, office system, supplies, et cetera, et cetera. So, and we have two things in the capital improvement plan budget. We are requesting $300,000 for a communications tower. I've tried multiple ways besides standing on my head to get money through the state and FEMA. And for various reasons, it hasn't worked out, but currently our communications tower is located at 171 Boston Post Road, which was the old location of our EOC, and the tower is still there. However, we have moved. So now we have 6.5 miles of fiber optic network that go from that tower up Route 1 to our facility. And as we all know, anything in between there, tree comes down, car accident, takes wires down, that could affect our connectivity for public safety communications. So having a tower on site on the property drastically reduces the possibility of losing that critical communication. So that's why we are putting that into the CIP. And I've also requested a $50,000 request for an emergency management vehicle. It's a dual purpose. So I'm not putting as many miles on my own personal car. And the second reason is because we've recently acquired with nuclear safety funding a brand new traffic control trailer to house all of our road safety signs, traffic cones, emergency lighting that we would need on site for something, and other items related to traffic control, so that it can be hooked up to and driven to whatever location we need to be able to put those things out. It's a lot more efficient than the way it's currently being done, where officers have to go to a shed and pull out what they need and throw it wherever they can fit it into their cars and then bring it to the site. And if it's a large scale event, you're going to have multiple cars doing that. So we went ahead and got the funding for the trailer, so everything could be in one spot, hook it up, drive it over, easy peasy. And that's it. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you, Julie. I have this one. Well, first, thank you for everything. Yeah, the work that you do here in town is incredible. For the transportation, is there a vehicle available to you now that you can utilize, or no? That's why you put it in the capital.
I don't have one. I use my
There's
own
not
personal
using
car.
only, so there is no vehicle. Okay.
Yeah.
Good question.
Sure.
You mentioned Region 4.
Mhm.
Could you talk a little bit more about that? Is that emergency management, or is that?
No, it's a carve out, like, there's 5 regions within the state of Connecticut as far as, the state's concerned. So Region 4 is basically the entire eastern portion from north to south. It includes 42 towns and 2 tribal nations. So, and all of these towns within that sliver of the state are part of Region 4. So whenever we have an emergency support function 5 emergency management meeting, all the emergency management directors, well, that's the only ESF that's actually split in 2, where there's a north and a south. So we do the south ESF 5, but any other of the ESF emergency functions that have public works or public health or cybersecurity, those are the entire region. So when we hold our cybersecurity meeting, it's representatives, IT professionals, emergency managers, first select people, school IT professionals that are all attending these meetings from Region 4. So there's quite a few members of these committees, and that explain it.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
For the $50,000 vehicle, would that be a new vehicle, a lease vehicle? What, like, how would that work?
However you wanted to buy the vehicle. It's, whatever is going to be the most economically.
Okay, you're saying you would, besides using it for yourself, you would be putting in signs in it?
No. The signs are in the trailer. We bought a trailer.
Okay,
So the vehicle that I would get would have some sort of a trailer hitch, so you could hook up to the trailer and drive it to wherever you need it to go. So, but basically the main purpose of it would be, for me, on a regular basis, would be going to meetings, within the region, going to trainings instead of using my personal vehicle. So
That is something that is utilized throughout the town and other departments, to my knowledge, right?
What is?
Other vehicle, where they can utilize vehicles. The Park and Rec has a vehicle that they can go around it.
This vehicle, if we end up with a vehicle, it would be for their purpose, it wouldn't be shared.
Correct, but my point is that she doesn't have one that other departments do.
Right.
That was my point.
We're
Yeah.
trying it, we're trying to see if we can find the vehicle for Parks and Rec. Did we get a study?
So-
Vehicles might be coming up that aren't being used.
So a lot of departments do have vehicles. So Park and Rec, the director has one. In the budget, he requested a vehicle for the beach staff. That was taken out of the budget. The idea is, one of the fire marshals has an older car in the back of the room over there. And in the budget, there's a request for a new fire marshal vehicle. That car is on one of its last legs. It's a 2008, I believe, Eric. 2006, 2008. It's pretty old. But we don't have pool cars. So the planning and zoning have asked for a car. I think there's 4 or 5 cars in this budget. And I think 1 survived. I think it was the fire marshal vehicle. The idea is maybe we look at pool cars, taking, I think the assessor has a car. Some of the engineers have a car. The deputy public works director, the public works director. So a lot of people do have cars here. So it's just a balancing act of expanding the fleet and trying to shuffle things.
And maybe having a full car parked in one specific spot and that everybody could possibly use if needed.
Yeah, like
Instead of 5 separate.
like the first selectman doesn't have a car or a car you even use. So when we go to like our CCM meetings, every car in the parking lot is municipal plate 1 of every town. And
My
Dan
only thought
and I
with that
roll
would
up
be
and
is the stipend that he receives, I think it's covered. to be
Yeah.
honest. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't even think
Yeah.
that would be something that's needed, but if you are going to training and you are going to do all these different things within town, rather than putting it on your personal vehicle.
And a lot of times it's not even in town. It's
Right, it's out of town.
like Fairfield, I'm going there on Tuesday,
Sure.
and that's 80 some odd miles each way.
Yeah, and that model, I mean, the state uses that too for pool cars. I mean,
Yeah.
they buy them in bulk and you just use them as needed, but they're not specifically assigned to one person.
What happens with the old, what these cars are used up? Do they just go?
It depends on the quality of the car. Most of the cars coming off service are really very low quality, so they're auctioned. It's a decision that's made by the town garage and the head mechanic. Sometimes they're auctions, sometimes they do find other use. If you
Yeah.
look out in your parking lot, you have several of them, which are out there, which are utilized by different departments within town hall. So it depends again on the mechanical abilities of that car when it comes offline. They're high mileage, a lot of years, generally they're, 5, 6, 7 years on the road. So, sometimes you get a good one that lasts.
Yeah.
That's when it comes. It's the same as a full vehicle, but it comes to building department or one of the other departments.
I know right now with all the construction, there's a lot of cars that are being used up idling a lot of, not so much driving, but the engines are running and, I don't know which is worse for stress on a car, just being running for, 18 hours a day sitting there or being driven around a lot. So, maybe we'll find, a couple more years from now, with some of those cars come off. We'll have to evaluate it if it's worthwhile.
This last year we had the K9 car, which is an older K9 car, which was in disrepair, so that came off. That's not valuable to anybody simply because it's not worthwhile to try to fix the things that were needed in that. A new car replaced that. The K9 guy didn't get a new car, but a new car replaced that fleet. But just to point out to you, so there's one right there that comes off the road that is not of benefit to anybody simply because it's, I hate to say a big paperweight that's gonna it'll get auctioned.
Yeah.
For parts and whatnot.
I had a similar kind of question, not to divert the conversation with your car, but not be repurposed? Could the materials not be recycled for a new one?
It would depend on really how you looked at your system. Right now, it's an integral part of how you have your radio communications for the town. Yes, it could be. If you looked at a situation where you put a tower or a building, we took all the infrastructure off of that and it was put in a different spot, as long as that radio system was maintained. There is stuff on there that is utilized by some of the other town departments, the water department, et cetera, with their monitoring systems. So it would be a technical conversation to say, if you could get everything off of that, then ideally, yes, you probably could.
But there would be a lag in service between time it's all taken off.
There could be, and that's the whole goal of when you switch towers, you plan it and you implement it in a way that everything is up and running. Okay, now you decommission the tower, and get that moved. So there's ways to do it, and certainly I think we'd love to have that conversation if it ever came up, because we want to help the town best we can. But right now, lack of redundancy, but also I think Dan can tell you the network system is bogged down simply because all of our radio communications cameras are traveling over fiber. That goes into the network systems within the building. So obviously there's a lag because there's a lot of data that comes through that system. So we're relying on that as well. So it's redundancy, but also the ability to maybe free up your computer system or your network system, by having that microwave communication rather than fiber. Okay.
Well, again, and thank you for the grants. That whole process, you can have a 1-page grant, you can have a 50-page grant. It's quite exhaustive. Who writes the grants? Is that you?
I do, yeah.
That's incredible.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing that. I don't think that people realize the work that goes into that.
It's a tremendous amount of work,
it
and
is.
especially the FEMA grants. The FEMA grants are 10 times above what other grants are, and I give Julie the credit that she has attempted 3 times through senators' offices and congressman's office and FEMA to try to get this tower grant. And every time she puts 1 million hours of work into it just to have it denied, not because of the merits of this project, because there's other projects that were looked upon and saying, okay, this is a more critical need to another community than yours. It's a good project. We sometimes start out as number 1, but it's a great process. We get bogged down by something else that's more significant.
Get a grant one year, can you just like resubmit, or do you have to start from scratch? Yeah, okay.
So hard
I
to
was
miss.
hoping you could just be like, okay, here it is,
Yeah.
you got it.
We would love that.
Date
So
on
much
it,
easier to
send
do
it
that.
in.
Yeah, I got so good at it by the 3rd time I applied for the grant. I think it was for the generator for the new building. They said, this is the most comprehensive explanation we've ever seen. I said, okay, well, hey, at least I'm learning something, right? So it's all good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All you do, and You know, I want to say, being the first selectman, the reason you lose sleep at night are the issues that are being covered by the people in this room, and you guys do a great job, and I'm always well informed when there's something going on in a storm, so I want to thank you for everybody here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, good afternoon, good night. Thank you for having us here.
It's your show.
Anybody need a break before we start? Okay.
No, we're good.
The hardest part is already now. Okay, I'll tell you that as an educator, you recognize that. Right? What I do is give an overview of our services to start, and then we go into the 3 budgets at the end of that. I think it's a better way to present because it allows you to see what we as an organization do. And that organization is the police department, dispatch, and the animal control, all woven into one. So what is our mission? Our mission statement is important. The mission of the East Lyme Police Department is to serve the public in a professional manner. We take on the responsibility of making our community safe for all those that live, work, or pass through our community. We strive to make our roads safe for motorists and pedestrians alike. It's our responsibility to work with other agencies and the public we serve and treat everyone with respect and dignity. And that is something that we take extremely serious. Our core values: respect for all persons, both in and outside the organization. We will inspire respect and confidence in the public trust by performing all duties impartially and respecting the dignity of all citizens and fellow employees. We strive for excellence in all our activities. We value professionalism and a team effort to provide the effective public safety services, provide a high level of customer service at all times. We will work cooperatively with other town, state, federal agencies, and citizen organizations to provide the highest level of service to our residents, businesses, and visitors, and we'll seek the highest level of ethical and moral conduct in our on and off-duty activities. So, when we talk about the structure of a police department or how we got here, so to speak, in 2014, the Task Force on 21st Century Policing came out with a final report, and that final report identified 6 pillars of policing. Those 6 pillars were meant to promote effective crime reduction while building public trust. And in the time that I've been here, that has really been our focus, is to do these things. Now, we will talk a little in a few minutes on this. We've expanded this greatly with the accreditation work that has been done, but this is the foundation of all of that. And those 6 pillars are building trust and legitimacy, policy and oversight. Turn my head a little bit. Technology and social media, cops and crime reduction, training and education, officer wellness and safety. All of those are things, and I think those of you who have been on Board of Selectmen or Board of Finance for periods of time before that know that when we come forward, it's usually for something related to all these things, and you've been extremely generous over my time here in 7 years to allow us to build all of that foundation. And I think it's been very successful up to this point. So what we do: East Lyme Police Department provides public service to residents and visitors of the town of East Lyme. East Lyme Police Department Dispatch Center handles all the 911 calls originating within the town of East Lyme, provides dispatching for the East Lyme Police Department, Flanders Fire Department, Ionic Fire Department, and East Lyme Ambulance. They also provide monitoring and dispatch services for the East Lyme Water and Sewer Department, and they provide control for Channel 22 services. They also have communication with senior center buses, but that is not a constant. That is, if they need something, our dispatchers are available to them over the radio should they have an issue that they need to handle. The East Lyme and Waterford Animal Control Division provides animal control services for the towns of both East Lyme and Waterford. That's combined service, and we'll talk about that in that budget. So, East Lyme Police Department is responsible for maintaining the safety and security of all residents and visitors to the town of East Lyme. Currently, the resident population of East Lyme is 18,487 in the 20 census. This does not include the visitors to the town's many beaches, shops, parks, and we significantly add to the town's population and traffic. And we know that each year that gets bigger and bigger. You go through downtown Antioch at any point of the spring and summer on the weekend, it is jam-packed. And understanding that all has an impact on your law enforcement, your fire departments, because it's not a quantified number. You know how many people live here and have houses here, but what we don't know is the people that come in every single day, that we are still responsible for the policing of. I'm gonna also say that there's a lot of people that come into our community, not for the summer, not for tourism, that are certainly here for other reasons that we end up dealing with as a police department and the fire and EMS very often. So our current staffing in the police department is 30 full-time sworn officers, and that's what's authorized. Minimum patrol, I just want to point this out to you. The minimum patrol is still by contract, 1 sergeant and 2 patrol officers for this town. Woefully understaffed, and we're working very hard. And I think with a lot of the hires that we've had recently, we're in theory bumping this up on scheduled shifts, but now it's a work in progress with the union. We've been negotiated part of the year to increase that staffing in the summer months to 1 more patrol officer. And I'd like to see that consistently be around because it certainly is needed. Responsible for 34 square miles of land and coastline. Our staffing is at 1.95 staff per 1,000, which if you remember a couple of years ago, we were the 5th lowest in the state. Now we are the 13th lowest. And I just point that out to know what you have for your staffing. The Connecticut staffing level for the state is 2.54. Now that includes everything: police, dispatch, support, animal control. So it's not necessarily always the exact apples to apples, but remembering that for our numbers, it's not just police officers on the street, it's dispatchers, it's records, it's administrative assistant, it's ACOs. All of those things kind of come into that number and how it's figured out. So some departments may have, a higher number because they have much more dispatch staff or record staff or community service staff. But just to give you kind of a ballpark with that. Our staffing profile with the 30 full-time officers, we have 1 currently in the academy. She will be graduating hopefully in May, and that puts her on the FTO program that estimates about a November 23 patrol date. And by that, I mean, that's when that right now probationary officer.
24?
Yes.
Yeah, 24 too, yeah. All right, 24. Numbers guys stick with it. It's 24. And that is the end of the FTO program, and that is an estimate of when that individual would be beneficial to us because now they can work on the road by themselves and be an extra car that's helped them. Our current setup is 1 chief, 2 lieutenants. We have Lieutenant Masick and Lieutenant Jezierski, 6 sergeants, 3 detectives, 1 school resource officer, 17 patrol officers, 3 part-time officers currently are on our books, and 8 full-time dispatchers. We have 4 active part-time dispatchers, 2 full-time ACOs, and 2 support personnel in our agency.
Do we have a horse too or no?
Well, I'm gonna get to the horse a little bit.
Just check.
So, I like sometimes to point out what we do in our community versus some other communities. And I only say that for, the conversation of we do much more with far less. If you look at the comparison of like population towns around the state of Connecticut, we are a department that has 18,600 residents, 30 officers. Our administration is a chief and 2 lieutenants, and I say that only because the responsibilities that are placed on the department, especially under police accountability, have grown tremendously. So it's a very stressful thing now on administrative staff because there's far more tasks than we used to have. Our overall budget for police dispatch and ACO is $4.3 million. You see the comparison, not just of officers in those other communities, but also of their administrative setup and what they have working administratively, as well as the budgets of those agencies. And I just point that out to you for comparison, so you kind of have an idea of what we do. And I compliment our officers every single day for the hard work and dedication because they do far more with far less. And that's not just less officers on the road, but some of the resources they have are less. And we try to be as efficient as possible with the things that we do have and try to give them the best equipment possible, give the residents the best service, while also balancing the checkbook with you guys to make sure we're giving, what we can give to the community. So our statistics. 2023 for the year, we had 16,060 calls for service. We had 1,603 motor vehicle stops, 197 traffic accidents. Only 47 of those had injury. And I point that out because I think that's an important piece. Most of our accidents are, really kind of the Flanders Road area where there may be low speed turning accidents, rear end accidents, not high impact injury accidents for most of it. We had 883 pieces of evidence come through the evidence room. And again, I point that out because we have one of our 3 detectives that does part of his job is to manage that evidence room. That is again a large task that has to take place because there's a process that is in place for that. Things that have to go to the laboratory, things that have to be purged, things that have to go before the examiner receives property for a determination of where it's going to go. So there's a lot of work that has to happen with that evidence that comes in. Our Axon in-car body cameras, which upload to evidence.com. This past year in 2022, because I had a stat from that, we had 20,156 uploaded videos. And that should be 23. I don't know. I had a year problem there. So yeah. So that is 20,156 videos. Well, that's important because that takes a lot of space, a lot of time. And you'll see a little bit later when we talk about records, when there's FOIs for those videos, it takes a tremendous amount of work that we're doing. 322 arrests. Right now we have a 6.98 increase in criminal investigations in 23 over 22. And our clearance rate is 43.04, which I think, I point out that if you report something to the East Lyme Police Department, almost 50% guaranteed that we're going to come to a successful solution. That solution means we're arresting somebody or identifying it and able to close that case out, appropriately. So I think, again, our officers do a tremendous job with less. What the arrests are for, just to go through this, is everybody sees arrest numbers and what the heck are they for? 18 assaults, 62 breach and disorderlies, 59 DUIs, 58 FTAs, 46 drug arrests, 37 larcenies, 12 violation of probation, and 18 violation of protective orders. That's a summary. That's not all inclusive like every arrest, but it shows you the categories where we have the vast majority.
What's FTA?
Failure to appear in court.
Oh.
So headlines this month only. And I point this out just so you see, what's happening here. But, we had an article about the drug prevention curriculum, 2 charged with operating a drug factory after a car stop. Body found in East Lyme, wooded area, 95. East Lyme bolsters critical incident response team for regional approach. 2 men, 1 wearing no shoes, led police on a chase in freezing temperatures. And New York residents use East Lyme woman's credit card to buy iPhones. Police said. Yep. And please identify second victim in fatal East Lyme fire. I point this out just because it is not a sleepy little town that nothing happens. There's a lot of things that happen here. There's a lot of things that, are publicized. There's a lot of things that are publicized that happen. And we try to keep it as, in check as possible. But I point this out because in most of those cases, or a lot of those cases, those are people with no connection to our town that are committing crimes coming in, we're getting involved with. So I say that because when we talk about population, we talk about the officers per 1,000, it doesn't consider stuff like this. It doesn't consider some of these cases that we have that are dealing with people that are coming into our town, into our hotels, into our areas to commit different crimes. But the positives. New York Times, so the East Lyme's a clean, safe, peaceful, and quiet town. And I love that. The fact that that is our reputation, when we as police know there's a lot that we do and a lot that goes on, the perception of people is this. And I'm proud of that, because I think that has to do a lot with what we do as a police department, what you do as the Board of Selectmen, what the fire department does, what everybody does in this town, education, to make it seem like somewhere that people want to be. And that's the atmosphere I think we all want to keep. So what I point out to you is, while we have low staffing, we also, this year is the first time that they were able to quantify this stat through new NIBRS type reporting numbers. We're the 6th lowest in the state in crime. And that's 8.3 crimes per 1,000. The only ones that are lower, Canton, Richfield, Groton, Long Point, hard to imagine that, Madison, and Weston. So again, I point out, we'd be pretty damn good for having low staffing, but we keep our community safe. So again, I will always compliment the officers we have here for the great jobs that they do. Community connection, I think, is important. And one of the pillars is social media. One of the pillars is talking about how we interact with the public. So this is one of the posts that we had about a community engagement or contest I wanted to do with Snowman. 44,000 people are reached. That shows you the reach of people that are engaging with our police department. No matter what we do, no matter what we put out there, there's positive responses to that. And I only say that because our public, and the public that has, that are your constituents, I think are supportive of the police. And they like the job that we do, they're responsive to them, And everything that we put out there has positive comments and positive reactions. So highlights of this last year, and there's Mike on the ATV like that.
I thought you were gonna put that in.
Yeah, well, sorry. Accident, it's like a year or so. But this year we achieved, Danica Post Tier 1, 2, and 3 accreditation. So yeah, congratulations. Please applaud Lieutenant Zarski for the amazing work that she did to get to that point. Well, that is a huge lift because yeah, it was great to get there, but now we have
to keep it.
Yes.
Now we have to keep it.
I'll show you the picture. So now we have a board with all of our tasks that we have to do. And most of those are tasks that either one of us or 3 of us have to do. So it gets voluminous. But we did it. So it mandates 93 continuous actions to stay in compliance. So it's not just getting into that accreditation. It's actually saying, what do you maintain every single year with proofs and with policy updates that you maintain that. We have reports after reports after reports now that are required by, by the Police Accountability Act. Lieutenant Mason did a great job of getting the e-ticket printers installed in the vehicles, and that does an amazing job of now making it much more efficient. An officer has the ability, instead of sitting there and writing the ticket that somebody may get, they swipe it and it prints out the ticket. No errors on that ticket. It's legible. And also it saved a tremendous amount of time for that officer and for the person from the public that they are stopping. So he secured a grant for that. He did an amazing job of getting those in the car. So definitely applause to him for doing that, because again, one more piece that makes our officers' job much more successful. National Night Out, we had the second one this year, just as I think more successful than the first. And we can't wait for the third. Again, interacting with our community. Tip a Cop, same thing, holiday toy drive, sponsor the family for the holiday season. We take our community very seriously, and we like the interaction we have with them. We were able to add a second police canine at no additional cost, which I think is a huge improvement, because a canine to buy is a certain amount of money. To train and get that officer off the road and go to 6, 7, 8 weeks of training, there's a cost involved. We were able to have an officer who lateral from a different department, had a dog still in its working prime. We were able to work with the union to get that dog up and running, which has been phenomenal for our agency, and it was done at 0 cost, which I think is a huge benefit. We restructured the detective division, continued to do that under Lieutenant Dzierski, where we are actually, doing tasks different. Have the retirement of Detective Babcock. She did a phenomenal job in this town for a long time, but we've kind of now taken the detective division, have a little bit of a different focus, and that's no knock on anybody or how it was done. It's just, we want them to be much more active and responsive to what we need. But DRE certified officer, who's done a tremendous job and, one of the best in the state now. And we've also added additional accident reconstructions. And I say that because many of you who have been here or the Board of Finance before had me come to you to say, I need more money for specialized training. Well, this is showing where that training is going, and it definitely is capitalizing. Some of the training, I'm not going to bore you with this. That's a good picture of Mike. He's on it.
DRE, what's this?
Drug recognition expert. So the state has passed some statutes that require DREs to be called out, whether it's a fatal accident, serious injury accident, a lot of DUIs, and they didn't give the funding for that. So we have one of the ones in the region, and more towns are adding them on, but they have to come out to certain type events, because now what the statute requires is them to do an evaluation, which is a half medical evaluation with individuals to see, are you under the influence of something other than alcohol? What are your physiological signs, not just what's your breath or blood. It does a whole lot more. So we're part of that, and other departments are going to have to be part of that. We're probably going to have to send more people in the future. But it's a rigorous training where he had to go to Arizona. He had to, he had to really work in prison there to kind of get his training. And I think, this is something that we embrace, but it's a regional approach. It's a state approach, really, because he's gone to Hartford several times for accidents that happen. It depends on who's working when. And we share that resource because they're going to give us that resource if we need it, and he's not working. So but again, it's part of the statutes that were changed in the state, and us just trying to catch up to that. I won't bore you. You have this in your paperwork, but types of trainings we have to go through, I think it's important just to know. It's important to know because when we look at that training line and see, well, why are we paying for this? This is the types of stuff that we're doing. And also for accreditation. So part of those 93 tasks, we have annual policy training, unusual occurrence training, a duty to intervene training, search training, pursuit policy training, NIMS training. So all of those areas are now added to the additional mandated trainings that post had to be certified. So much more things. So now we have to pay officers to be able to take those trainings or to have an instructor come in and do it. So just to point that out to you. Now records. Records in our agency is a part-time position. This year, or 2023, excuse me, they processed 2,040 reports, and I say they, one person who works part-time, process that, and by processing, every officer writes a report, the supervisor signs off on it, and then records checks it and does everything with that to make sure that it's sufficient to meet all of the tasks that it has to be met. We had 225 paper FOI requests and 237 external video shares. That means that the lieutenant had to sit there, go through video, redact, whether it is one person, whether it is a 2-second video or an hour video, do the redactions that were needed, and then send a link to somebody to get that, whether it's the court system, whether it's an attorney's office, whether it is an individual. That does not count all of the ones who came in with thumb drives and FOI requests that asked for them. And I point this out because every department is dealing with this, and this is part of the legislature this year is proposing to be able to charge for these things, because right now we're not allowed to charge for any of the research time. Well, right now that is basically taking an administrator off of any other tasks for a large part of days sometimes, and also a records person who's part-time who can't follow up on the FOI. So this is really a deficit. Yep, absolutely.
So just as an example, I had an FOI request this week, 6 cases. They wanted body cam videos for all 6 of those cases. It took me 8 hours to sit through, watch all the videos, redact them to be able to put that out to the public. It's very time consuming.
So the other thing is too, if there is a charge that might kind of delay people or to stop people
It
from
would
actually
deter.
doing it, would be a deterrent, because some people I know are just
Yes.
very, they send a lot of FOI requests because
There's no reason not to.
Yeah, there's no reason not to. Exactly.
So I'll say
So-
this year alone. So
Hoping that-
since January 1st, our records department has received 151 FOI requests. Now, those are not just individual citizens. These are attorneys, these are other agencies, insurance companies. And for body camera video, we've already done 24 shares. The other videos were requested through the FOI. So those 65 citizens or 29 agencies and 6 attorneys and 51 insurance companies could be video as well. So some of these are multifaceted. Some of these requests are, I want a report, I want phone calls, I want a body camera. And as the lieutenant was saying, that could take the vast majority of the shift a day just to do that. And especially if you have someone that is fictitious in their filing, now you have another issue because it's taking up time that we just really don't have. So I just want to point that out, how busy records is, because that certainly is a crucial part of our agency. So our goals. Johnny Hull on a horse is part of our goals. Just putting that out there. He looks majestic and he was so proud that day. But one of our goals is we have the post tier 1, 2, and 3 accreditation. Our goal now is the CALIA national accreditation. We have completed the paperwork for that. We are getting that process underway. When I'm allowed to, I'm going to send the paperwork when she tells me it's okay. But I think it's crucial that we have that, not just state recognition, but we have national recognition for the standards that we uphold. We want to enhance our web services. I think right now our website is a little bit lacking when it comes to the interaction and abilities that our public has. That will include utilizing Power BI to share updated stats with the public. It's a very interactive process. If you take a look at Fairfield's website or some of the other communities, they are dynamic. I want the same thing. I want people to go onto our website and find information that they need, want, and also explore, like some agencies have the ability to report some maybe low-level crime on there rather than tying up an officer, whether if it is a vandalism or property crime where they just need a case number report, you can do it online rather than tying up an officer. So we're looking at all of those things. Ensure our agency is fully staffed. Right now, we are down 1 person. We do far better than other agencies with maintaining and retaining officers. But right now we have the 1 opening due to retirement. Provide the most effective structure and service to our community, and that's looking at always reevaluating how we're doing things and how we're structured. Maintain the current and cultivate new relationships with community agencies. perfect example is the new agency that was created in town, human services type agency. Don Hall is a very, very big part of that. And we are looking forward to maintaining that. We just also gained a new DCF liaison to our agency. The last one got promoted. We have a new one that came in. Those social services interactions and liaisons are certainly crucial to what we're doing because it allows us to work better with vulnerable populations, to refer people for certain issues and problems, and get that off of the plate of the police officer. While police may still have to go there and mitigate or figure out the problem to start, we have more tools now to be able to hand that off to other agencies. And also get the highest quality public safety possible. Budget increases. So when you look at our budget increases, 3% contractual in the police department, additional 2 officers, which I think that was not there, right? Okay, so that was asked for. The police commissioner, if you recall, had a long-term plan to get our staffing up, recognizing how low we were per capita. And that was to put 2 officers on each year in order to get up that number. I will say that you have noticed that as we've been able to increase, I came in those 24, now there's 30. The quality of what we can do is much better. The investigations are better. The proactive policing is better. The crime rate, obviously, you're seeing we're the 6th lowest in the state of Connecticut, only 6 or lower. That is a tremendous feat, when you're doing it with less people. So again, staffing is a crucial thing, and we have to maintain what we have. Training, academy tuition for new officers, increased records. We asked for that to go from 25 hours to 40 to meet that demand. And also the dispatch overtime, which you'll see. We're asking for an increase in that to meet the actual. We'll talk about that when we get to budget. So police department budget. Like when you look across there, we have a decrease in the administrative assistant. Deb Lewandowski, who worked many years in the town, retired. So that being a union position, Leanne Santos, who came into that position, is at a much lower rate. Yes, sir.
Catch up. You were going over the police budget right now?
Oh, I shouldn't do that, right? I should probably do
No, 216.
216. Okay, yeah, 216. Yeah, good. You were doing the right thing. You're on my number. I bumped it. So we have had a reduction in that line. You'll see the police officer line is an increase. There were several things. It was a year without a contract. So last year had the same amount from the year before. There was a contract that was negotiated. That new rate went into effect plus a new rate for July. So that's why you have kind of a double bump there, which I'm sure.
A triple bump.
Triple bump.
Well, because
511? Okay, so I'm just trying to follow.
so there was just, do you mind, Chief, I jump in for a sec? So there was 3 things that kind of happened there. Labor negotiations. We did not change the number from year over year, so that kind of contributed to it. This year, there's an increase. And then also, last year when we did the budget, we had 2 police officers starting November 1st. That is 8 months of salary for each of those officers. So this budget cycle, we have to absorb 4 months for each of those officers. So before we add, any additional officers, budget speaking, we are adding 2/3 of a full-time officer. Because last year we only added 4/3 of a full-time officer. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So.
So jumping back up to the line before that, we had proposed to increase the records position to full-time from part-time. I just want to keep that on the radar because I think that is going to be an absolutely crucial thing in our agency because we're getting so bogged down with the FOI and report requests that, I don't want it to get to a break. I want to try to stay ahead of that. The officers, if you see the department head requested, that was the 2 officers, which have both been cut in the first part of the process, but I just, remind you of that, that staffing still has to be a priority that we keep in mind. The next 3 are all being increased simply by the percentage of increase of salary. Those are numbers whether it is police officers, foot patrol parade, overtime, boat duty, all of those things, and boat duty actually I dropped off of that. All of those are really based on hours. And the rate of pay when it goes up doesn't mean that we can put less hours out there. So that's why that increase is happening corresponding to that. I didn't drive up the boat duty I think right now we've been in good shape with, the boat that we share with Waterford and putting it out there, where we have some discretion. But we all know our coastline gets extremely busy in the summer. And we have more and more calls for people making complaints. We proactive patrol is absolutely necessary to be out there to keep people in line, so to speak. We share one boat with Waterford. We have a second vessel that we also put out there certain times ourselves, or it's also a rapid deployment should somebody overturn kayak or missing boat or something like that, and the regional boat's not out, we can rapidly deploy our 20-foot boat to go out there quickly. So longevity is contractual. Training, we've asked for, actually there was a decrease in that. There's a slight increase over this current year. That really has to do with looking for the trainings we need. The specialized trainings for accident reconstruction, sexual assault investigation. I believe in training, and accreditation requires training. So we have to stay ahead of that. Lieutenant Jaworski is a training officer, does a great job at making sure we're keeping everybody trained. We're offering officers the best quality training, and we try to accommodate that because, again, education is crucial to what we're doing. Going back through this radio maintenance, increased 5,000. It shows a 25% increase, but it's 5,000 because we are on the cusp of moving to the state radio system. We're being bogged down by the state a little bit with some firmware issues. Not our issue. It's a Harris radio to state issue with our firmware, but the radios are much more expensive. So the bench time, if we have to have one repaired, is going to cost more than what we have in the old radio. So that's an estimate to go up $5,000. No idea, what that's going to really truly be if we have to use it, but I tried to be irresponsible with that. Going through, there's really not many other increases down there until you get to training supplies. And again, the training supplies is going up because the cost of the items that we need. If we're doing taser training, we have to have the taser cartridges, and those are much more costly. The ammunition to do firearms training is much more costly. So things such as that. Also, we're trying to get up where every officer has a taser. We're very close to that. What happens is there's some officers now that don't have their own issued taser, which is our desire, and it's the best way to operate. So they have to trade off with somebody else. That's not the best way to handle that situation, especially when you have a large event like Celebrating Lyme. Everybody's working. So that means now you put other officers out there without that less lethal capability. So it really kind of hinders what they're trained to do. But at the same time, as we all know this, if you have something assigned to you, you take better care of it. If it's traded off between people, there's always the possibility of having something happen to that. So, again, that issued taser is the standard, is what we would like to accomplish, and we're very close to that. So there's a slight increase inside of that line for that. Everything else stayed status quo inside the police budget. If you also just kind of flipping back to the next part of that, where you have the revenue, I just want to point out to you, revenue is important, but we don't have a large drive in revenue. It just kind of offsets some of the stuff that happens. But I think the biggest one I want to remind you and point out, when you look at my salary, there's a large portion, because I'm the EMT, that gets reimbursed by Millstone. So, just keep that in mind, that you're actually getting a good bargain because of Millstone. They're really picking up a large part of that through the state. Not Millstone corporately, but the state grant. And also the outside jobs for cars. We have, since for the last 6 years, we've funded the purchase of our vehicles because we're billing the outside agencies for the vehicle. We all know what's happening at 74. That's drastically increasing what is coming in. So we hope to be able to continue that, but certainly Kevin can talk more to that. Budget. Actually, any questions on this before me? Yes.
Real quick, Dana, for you, nice job on accreditation. Kathy tells me a lot about it. As you get in my business, as we get further accredited, we go to Yamaha school and all the business schools. Our labor rates are raised for warranty. We're giving more money for co-op and advertising, things like that. The higher we go, are you available for any grants once you get the federal recognition? Are you available? Nothing to help you financially for being more accredited?
No, and that's one thing that the problem when the police accreditation or accountability happened is there was a lot of things that were tacked on there, but there was costs involved which were not reimbursed by the state. This is one of them, the accreditation, and we just went to an accreditation meeting last Tuesday, where honestly, I mean, there was a conversation that towns are struggling because whether you are Hartford Police Department or you are a 1, 2, 3 person police department, it's the same standard. You have to have the same policies, the same work. So it becomes very difficult as a small agency. She does a phenomenal job of doing more with less with that. And I think we have it kind of narrowed down to how it can be done efficiently. And that's why we're pretty confident that CALIA would work and we'll be able to go through with that. Because most of what CALIA is going to require is already being done by a tier 3. But I understand the question. I wish there was money. And certainly if it becomes available, we're going to jump.
There should be a reward for a level of expertise. Secondly, to you, the $400,000 line for overtime. You're receiving money back for overtime, for example, on the project down at 74. Do you get paid?
Those are two different. So that overtime line is simply officer replacement. So that overtime line you see there is officers, vacations, sick, investigations, anything that requires an officer that's not on road construction. That's a separate place and it doesn't show in our expenditure lines here. So the road construction is not here. That makes sense.
Okay, it does. And I firmly believe that 2 officers and 1 sergeant per shift is not enough for all the square miles we have. Okay, just based on what's happening in the area, the crime level still is up. Mike, for you, I got to tell you that I'm still working on the vote from the Harbor Management Commission. 1 person is holding that up, and that's our harbor master in New London. 1 person. And it makes no sense at all that you should not have the bigger boat for emergency response versus the small 20-footer. It's an easy swap to do since we're sharing the product anyway, and the grant's already run out now.
Yeah, and I closed that FEMA grant out in September, beginning of October is when it was finally.
Correct.
done. So
You know what I'm talking about, right, Mike? Okay.
Before we move on, I just want to go back to 412, just really quickly, because you asked for 55,000. So you want a full-time, you've got knocked back down pretty much to half-time.
Yep.
So my question, well, I have, the first one would be, this new peddling permits that was shifted over into your department. Now, is that something that this clerical person is going to be doing?
So we were already doing 99% of the work anyway. In theory, it was just being handed to the first selectman's office to sign.
Okay.
So
So
we're
you
not,
do all the work behind the scenes?
nothing's changing other than the final signature.
Okay. Because I would like to see, if you can't get full-time, maybe 80%. So if that's something that we can take a look at, and I think that it would be beneficial, and I think that it would be just an investment, really, to be honest with you. I understand. I do think that it is needed, and I think that there's a reason that you're asking for it. I look at it more as an investment. So if I look at it, well, all right, if you're not going to give me the full time, then give me 80%. Give me something for you, right? And then the other thing that kind of my eyebrow went up was the training. So if you're asking for 76 and you're being taken down to 68, I'd like that to be relooked at too and possibly put back in. Because
Which one, I'm sorry?
I'm talking about training, so it's number 517. And again, I just go back to investment, right? So when you train your officers, when you train your employees, you're going to get a better result. And in the end, we're all, we want the best result for East Lyme. So I would like that to be added back in, please.
And for the entire 76, we added that, so it goes up to 76, you're thinking that we should go up a little bit more, or what's your thought?
I would be happy with at least half. If, I'm willing to compromise, but I think that it's worthy of the full, sure, I do. But I also understand that we have lots of other
We have
budgets and we have lots of other restraints, so, I don't want to be,
Yeah, so
irresponsible.
when we can look at that
But I
too.
think there's work.
Right.
You do about police, the what's the things about getting people to pay. Is there some agency that we can contact?
Well, they do pay. The thing is, there's limitations to the FOI statute with what you can charge people. And the issue really becomes people that have a large amount of FOI requests, because the way the statutes are, and if it's electronic, they're able to set it electronically. You really can't charge, because all you are allowed to charge for is not the research time, not the time it took to accommodate it, it's the paper, the ink, and all that stuff. So,
So what we do charge now is I think it's 50 cents every page we print out and $5 for every thumb drive that we print.
last year we only got $1,000, 1,040. You know, for it, because a lot of the things aren't really driving pages or lots of money. It's time is really what it comes down to. But again, I think that's what the legislature is looking at this year, at least with the body cameras, to try to say people are making these requests and it's taking a lot of man hours and woman hours. Let's find a way to, charge for that.
Also, it takes priority. You've got a certain amount of response time. You've
Yes,
got to
they have
expand
to
that too.
be there.
And I think a nominal fee, like for 1 hour of labor or something like that would be perfect. And that will stop a lot of the frivolous, in my opinion.
So I think, to answer your first question, really the legislature, our representatives to contact them and say what the town of East Lyme, as a board of selectmen supports, because I think that's important.
The other thing I was gonna say too, like, when I request medical records, like from my law office, from a doctor or hospital, it's 65 cents a page, whether they send it, however they send it, whether they want to print it or email it to me, I'm still paying for it. So, if they have to pay for it, then a FOIA request should really have to pay for it,
Questions on police?
And notice that the radio maintenance appears here, but earlier in the presentation from IT, I'm sorry, emergency management, it appeared there also.
So that is the radio system. So this amount is if I have a radio inside of a police car, portable radio on the police officer that stops working. We send it to the company, they fix it. The money that's in the emergency management budget is for the overall overarching system, the towers, the infrastructure that's there.
I also had a question on staffing level, just talking about increasing 2 per year. I don't know if you did this, but we have a paper in our folder here from Superintendent Jeffrey Newton about what SROs. Is that the 2 police officers that are?
No, so this just came this past week.
We got that. I got that. Yeah, we got that
So,
yesterday.
we had asked for 2. They're basically supporting and saying that they would like to have another SRO, which we cannot provide at the current staffing. So we would have to add a officer to then put somebody as an SRO.
So the 2 people we're talking about today, for at this moment, would not become SROs. They would join the police force and then perhaps some point down the road, if they wanted to transition to an SRO.
Or someone who's already on the PD, who's had years on.
So I think, we had, the police commission plan was several years ago. That's for 2 each year. This is separate from that, where the Board of Education has determined they would like to have more SROs. And if you look at, Montville has, I think, 3 now, Waterford's going to 3. We have 1 officer for all of our schools. He does a phenomenal job. We have a great, relationship with our schools, but they're asking for more. And, we just don't have the staffing to provide.
So this is
They seem like they want it now, but again, I can't, that's between them. and
now.
Yes,
what is ACO?
animal control officer. Moving on to dispatch.
Dan, can I just explain your cuts for a second? Like how we got to your cuts? There's only 3 of them.
Yeah.
So we talked about the 2 police officers that were cut. The other cuts were, if you flip to the 216, your budget books. Sorry, Don. Sorry. The 216, the police department budget.
Yeah.
The second page breaks down the new officer equipment, the body cams, the tasers, the uniform, the academy tuition, and the drug psych test. So the cuts that we made were directly related, since we're not going to have those 2 new police officers. Those were the cuts. So that the money that was taken out of 517 was the $3,800 academy tuitions. And then some of the ones down below, the training supplies were the 2 new tasers and the 2 new body cams.
So that's why we kind of.
Those were the cuts.
Does that make sense?
So one thing that we changed several years ago was,
Thank you.
we didn't want the town to bear an unknown cost when we brought a new officer. So we identified 100% of what it costs to bring them on, including the uniform, the taser, the gun, the academy. So it's a real figure you could see of not just what the salary is, but everything else. Because if we hire them, we have to provide those things, and if the budget isn't increasing to add those things, and we have to take the money from somewhere else. So I just want to explain that. So that's
So we're backing that off because we're not able right now to hire the two more officers. We already have, we're paying for them. We hired them last year, like for part of the year, and then we're
I
paying
think
for
the
them.
training.
But they've already got the training.
What did you go down on the training? What's the reduction?
When you're talking about training, talking about 517,
Yeah.
the difference is the two $3,800 tuitions.
Okay.
So it's $7,600.
Okay.
And that ties out pretty good there, I think.
So that's the reason why.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So could you go back again to, we paid for a portion of those two officers last year.
Correct.
And now we're continuing to pay the second part in this budget.
So the two officers were hired in November.
Yes.
That's when they came on board. So the salary is what is increasing because you did not do 12 months of the salary. So that's what has increased.
Yeah, we budgeted it for the two new firemen, looking at them. We budgeted for the two new police officers November. So from July 1st to November 1st, that 4-month period, we didn't cover, we didn't have it in the budget. So we made sure we had 16 months of new officer, coverage in this current year budget. So in this year, we have to absorb 8 months of those police officers. So the 8 plus the 16 give you the 24.
Okay, so our goal was to try to increase the number of officers. So with our plan of trying to increase by 2 each budget cycle, when will we see the next? So we'll see the next request come in for 2025 or 20.
Well, we made a request for 2 here. That was taken out before I got to you.
Yeah.
So my assumption is the police commissioner would ask next year again for 2 additional officers. The goal ultimately was to staff up to 36 officers to get us to a more reasonable ratio per capita. So again, if it doesn't happen this year, certainly I believe they'll probably ask for it again next year.
And how long does it take from the time that we actually hire an officer? How long does it take for them to get certified?
It all depends. We've had great luck with lateral transfers. A lateral transfer with some of the people that we've gotten is on the road within weeks, where the new officer, let's just say we have somebody in the academy now, she's not going to be ready until November. She was hired last November. It's almost a year before they actually are a viable police officer for you. So the huge difference between getting a lateral transfer that's already certified and getting a new academy person, because again, that whole year is a salary you're paying and not getting a benefit from.
The concern here is that if we eliminate both positions, then we're getting behind. It wants to be the possibility of going, instead of deleting 2, just delete 1.
I would concur with them. As I'm sitting here thinking, well, if we can't get it, again, if you ask for such and such, we're looking for progress. If we can't do the whole amount, I always look for, well, what can we do? What can we do? So is that something I would certainly be in support of it?
See, considering the amount of time that it takes to get an officer on the road.
Sure.
So if we had in this budget and we didn't have someone that was coming from another department that was already experienced, then it's a full year before that officer can actually be on the road.
And that's also dependent on the academy.
Yes.
When they have an academy class. So I'm saying a year from when we hired this last one, but you could ask for one now and the academy does not have a class for 6 months available. You're at their, kind of whim there, but you have to wait. So it's always an unknown with entry level.
Part of the problem is we're absorbing this year the hire from last year in this budget. It is going up. We have other areas too that we need to be concerned about in the fire service and hard to do everything and still maintain a budget that will be acceptable to the public. And, yeah, I mean, it would have been nice to be able to add one more this year and hopeful that next year we'll be able to do a little better. When we're not absorbing, you know, a half a year's salary that some that we already hired. But I think this year, I think we have to go with what we have and use resources we have in other areas in the budget. There's only so much we can do. And we've done a pretty good job over the last few years. I mean, we have expanded the police force. We've tried to stick to a schedule. It's just there are other priorities too this year that we're trying to accommodate, trying to adjust. We can't do it all.
They're on the payroll when they're in school.
Yes.
Oh, they pass.
Well, and unfortunately ran into that with the last academy class. We had an individual that went to the academy, we paid him, went to the FTO program, and washed out towards the end of the FTO program. So you really paid almost a year of salary for someone to not be here anymore.
Is there any kind of contract with the police officer that once you train them?
Only if it's their choice. So if they say, hey, I don't want to be here, but when we're telling them this isn't working out.
No, I'm saying 6 months after being on the job here, another town recruits them.
Okay, that town has to pay.
Oh,
Yeah. But in a situation where we're telling somebody, you know, you're not gonna make it here, that's a loss.
That's a courageous move anyway, so that's good.
But, you know, I've always tried to support the police in this town and we've made a lot of improvements. This year is a very tough year and you just have to try to wait till next year if we can.
Let's go to the budget, for dispatch. Our dispatch center, as we described earlier, has 8 full-time dispatchers. They do a phenomenal job of running everything and kind of being that lifeline for all of us. Salary increase is simply contractual. Again, Kevin can explain that better, but I think it's 2 years of salary increases.
Same for them as well. Yeah, I believe. Yep.
One thing that we've done, and if you've been around for several years, you've seen what's happened with the overtime versus part-time. We were in a situation or in a system that relied heavily on part-time dispatchers to supplement the full-timers. That model is not a winning model anymore. Part-time workforce is extremely low. What it costs to train a part-time dispatcher, our experience was many times they would be here for a very short period of time and leave. So we invest the money in them and then not get the benefit of having them working here as a part-time dispatcher. So most of our shifts are taken by full-timers. So we kind of had a little switch in the last 2 years where we used to be very heavy on the part-time money and low on the overtime. Well, now because we really have hardly any part-timers, that has flip-flopped. So
It's also,
yeah, wait.
so it's also due to dispatch contracts. So contract language, July 1 of 23 changed, where they now get the first right of refusal for every single open shift. Whereas prior to July 1st, 23, those went to part-timers. So that's the big increase in the overtime line.
So that switch is there. So what we're asking for is something more in line with what we're actually experiencing and spending this year. But that comes with a reduction in the part-time because the part-timers, we have very few part-timers that work, and because of those schedule changes, it's really kind of a non-existent thing. So that really is the big driver change inside of this budget. On the training payroll, we want to offer more trainings to dispatchers. As we get more and more new dispatchers, we like to have them, just like the police officers, have more training if possible. And that training is in handling special circumstances, different types of active calls. So I think there's a benefit to having a much more well-trained workforce, no matter what the agency is. And if you want to expand anything more.
No, and some of this training it's mandatory. It's state required training. They have to do to maintain their certifications.
And we haven't, I don't think we've asked for any cuts in the training at all. We support them.
That is the discuss budget. Any questions on this? And the final, the animal control budget, Lieutenant Basic.
So one, you guys get settled in there, it's 226. Right, so you're not gonna see an increase in the first line to 11. This is a line, we split animal control with the town of Waterford, so they are billed out at 50% of salary fringe benefits at the end of the year. So every week when I do their payroll, they submit any sheets to me that have required overtime. So where they got called out on the off hours for calling Waterford or the town of East Lyme, the sheet basically tells me which town, which supervisor authorized it, the date, how many hours were billed out. I put that into a spreadsheet, turn that into finance by the end of the fiscal year. They submit a bill to Waterford, we get 50% of that back. We did have the ACOs jump into our collective bargaining agreement for a very short period of time, and they popped back out of it and are now with the unaffiliated. So we do not have a we don't have a set salary for this upcoming fiscal year for them yet. So that's why this is staying at 0%.
So the non-affiliateds, like in all the other budgets, there's a money we're holding on the side in the salary contingency line for the non-affiliateds.
The overtime, you're gonna see, you see a 24.99% increase. So again, we just start off by saying 50% of this gets kicked back, but one of the reasons why there is this increase is that we brought on the part-time animal control officer into a full-time capacity over the past year. So that way we now have coverage 7 days a week. So this increase is now you have a second full-time employee that if they are going to a mandated state training, if they've been out sick, anything like that, this is just to help offset that those trainings or those days out that either one of them or calls. They do warrant services. So if there is a call that requires them to do a warrant, whether it's in the town of East Lyme or town of Waterford, they go and they assist with those. Some of those things fall outside their normal scope of hours, so obviously they have to get paid for that. Training has stayed again right around the same 0. They do look for free trainings to go to, but there are mandated trainings, so that's what those lines get utilized for. There's a small actual expense. I know you're going to see that right at the beginning of 23, but that's just the way that fell at that point in the year. And pretty much right down the rest of the lines, you have a total of 1.47% increase overall in this budget. And again, with the payroll contingency, that's the only outlier that we're waiting on.
Question. Is the animal control officer, is this person also a police officer?
No.
Okay. And what do they actually do?
So they're, I step back. They are limited enforcement powers they have. They can give summonses for animal crimes. So nuisance dog, allowing the animal to roam.
Okay.
They have the ability to do that enforcement, but they're not a sworn police officer where they could arrest somebody for another type crime.
Okay.
But they're responsible for all domestic animals inside your community. So their job is anybody has a problem with a domestic animal, they're out there. They have to respond to that. They have to take care of that. Whether it's a dog bite, a roaming dog, neighbor, barking dogs. They also, Mason can probably explain this one. They do venture into wildlife sometimes, but we also know there's things that they don't do in wildlife. So
Yeah.
I can give you a quick rundown of some of the calls that they go on from the annual report. Their report goes on a calendar year, not the fiscal year, because for state and federal reporting purposes. But
Okay.
Animal control between the town of Waterford and East Lyme went to 1,381 calls for service for animals over the course of the 2023 calendar year. There were 48 hours of after-hour callouts, total of 6 tickets issued, 14 warnings issued. They investigated 52 dog bites, had 58 animals adopted out, There's 7 euthanizations, and there's a very strict protocol when those occur, that require both signatures from, police at East Lyme and Waterford, before they just can't euthanize a dog. They had some monies taken in, donations that come in, so just his quick synopsis of this were, total number of animals processed for the shelter for 23 year was 296. Of that number, only 7 required euthanization due to injury, illness, or aggression issues. 3 dogs, 1 sick injured dog, 3 injured cats. And it comes out to a 97% live release. So anything that they have, that's gone through there, and to include, again, some minor wildlife things that DEP won't take care of.
Okay, great, thank you.
Sorry, Rosanna, that's the one.
All right.
Any other questions on any of the 3
I'll
budgets?
just leave them right home. Yeah.
Okay.
That's fine. One more question. When you were talking about the e-ticket, so what do you take someone's like license and like scan it,
So-
or like, I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, so
my
what
mind.
happens if you remember, like through the years of finance, I came through, I got some new MVCs, mobile data
Yeah,
terminals and computers, and they have the capability to, when you look at the back of your license, you're like, oh, there's like almost like QR code at this point, right? What does that do? There's nothing on there. Well, that scans in. I had to work with the vendor to essentially just extract the basic data, that make sure the name's right, date of birth, and part and parcel of the address. That in turn, when that officer makes that stop and plugs in your plate, ABC 123, right? Comes
Okay.
back and I go up to the window, say I get your license from you, well, it's registered, you're the registered owner. So when that plate's run, all that data can then get pushed over to the e-ticket citation. So now they're not taking the time to handwrite this thing out. You're getting computer generated. The other issue that I stressed on this project was officer safety. They're not taking their eyes off that individual who could be very agitated after getting a ticket. Next thing you know, they're busy writing, and next thing you look up and somebody's running at their car. So what it does, this literally cut down that writing part at least 8 minutes within the average car stop, because they just click a button, all that data transfers over, they look, they have like 4 drop downs to fill out, hit print, it prints out the ticket, they give them an envelope with it, and that's it. Everything is there. The fines are totaled up, the court date's on there. If they choose to plead not guilty, all that language is on there. All the required, if they want to make a complaint, all that stuff is on there as well, as far as the racial profiling data goes. So, we now have those in the vehicle, and it's
Yeah, well, that
changed
sounds
the
amazing.
scrap.
Yeah.
All legible.
Yeah, because it's legible too.
Right, and when you go to, as the chief said a little bit earlier, part of that process is that part-time administrator with all the other things we're having to deal with, getting those tickets, making sure transmittal was done. Then, so we're saving money on labor, we're saving money on postage, because instead of having to mail this to Central Infraction Bureau, it gets automatically uploaded to CIB right through that system. So we've taken that whole element out of there as well.
Okay,
I
so,
think this,
I'm sorry, one more question then. So I got that with the e-ticket. So can this also be used like when you're like with a car accident, like to put in the information?
But
You know what I mean?
yeah, so the data terminal does that. It doesn't have, the e-citation just does written warnings for this all motor vehicle violation. So if you're going to an actual like accident scene,
Yeah,
if an infraction or a warning is going to be generated, absolutely, that can come out of that.
Okay.
But as far as like the sheet of paper
right,
that the
yeah.
officer hands you with your information,
and
the other
yeah,
vehicle's information, that still has to be
That-
handwritten
okay.
out. We don't have
anything yet, okay,
an avenue to do that yet.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not aware of one that exists
Yeah.
at this point.
okay.
With all technology coming soon.
I know, I'm sure it is, I'm sure it is, but not that good with the e-tickets, then that makes us talk much faster, right? I mean,
It's significantly decreased the amount of time they can see a vehicle pulled over. If you see one for an extended period, then that just means there's issues.
They're waiting for somebody else. Okay,
I
great,
just
thank
think
you.
the safety issue is really
Well,
important.
that's what I was gonna say too, yeah.
That is, and listen, from all the officers, they love the fact that those are in there, the fact that it does make them feel safer and as quick as it gets out, and it just makes the interaction with the public, during a time where they're probably not too happy getting an infraction, but they're not just sitting there for 15, 20 minutes waiting for this person to process the stuff. And again, it goes back to even when I said, what if they make a legible mistake on it? You can't put white out on a ticket. You have to start all over and start writing out another one. So
And you're under stress, you're trying to do something, you got someone in a car. And I think it reduces the frustration of the person in that car.
100%.
And that's a huge safety issue
that's
too.
what it's going to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a big deal.
One is a safety issue too, because like, you know, somebody pulled over the other day, I'm driving by and it's like, you know, you don't anticipate seeing somebody and it's like, oh my God, there's the cop and there's the, you know, the person they pulled over. Do you know what I mean? And it's just, you
That's
know,
good.
just more dangerous, I guess. I always feel like, okay, I want to make sure I don't get hit. No one's pulling out, whatever. So,
Yeah.
yeah, no, it's good. Thank you.
I see we're wrapping up here, and I need to be the guy that asks the big question at the end of the meeting.
Mhm.
I noticed the final pillar of the video was Mr. Wellness and safety. I saw that play out in the budgeting process primarily by safety. I'm curious, is there any effort or any investment made in officer wellness?
Yeah.
So
So there's a lot of work with peer support. We have officers, actually,
Yeah, we have 4 officers and 2 dispatchers that are peer support trained. So if any sort of critical incident happens, they can reach out to not just our department, but other departments and offer them peer support. They've actually are going to another training, so they're continuously training on this. They got another one coming up in April.
so that in terms of investment, that plays out in training.
It played out in
So,
training.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
so
a part of
anyone who's interested, any officer who's interested could submit the request to me and they can go and get peer support.
And also, I think that in the recertification training, there's much more application now of understanding psychological issues amongst yourself, not just simply with the public, but also self-evaluation type pieces. Also, we send officers now for a wellness check, is what it's called, is a psych eval, is going to a licensed psychiatrist to kind of make sure everything's okay.
Once they're hired.
No,
And they're hired, but then also again,
every 5 years.
every 5 years.
But certainly, if there's an incident or we notice that there's something, we have the ability to send somebody to EAP or to counseling if we think it's, important. The other thing too is supervisors are now much better trained at the ability to recognize that peer support is important because they're trained to recognize within their peers if there's an issue going on. But the supervisors are trained in that, as well as part of accreditation. There's a policy that we have now that we look at any kind of anomalies in statistics in that officer's behavior complaints, where we have to identify, okay, is there a problem here? Because now all of a sudden this officer is getting complaints about them, or they've used force several times, in a row. So we have these metrics now that are in our policies that are meant to kind of make sure that we're looking at everything and those things, are less likely to happen.
Yes, you'll have to forgive me. It sounds kind of reactive. Is there a more like systemic proactive?
Well, I think from the start in the selection process, I think we implement a lot of proactive initiatives to look at officer wellness and health and to look at well-rounded police officers that we're bringing in. I think that's a crucial piece of our recruitment, our selection process, is making sure that officers are, I think a better skill set to maintain throughout their career. But certainly, I hate to say, trauma response is a reactive process for the most part. We have to stay on top of that as administrators and as an agency to say, what's happening, because you have an officer that may have a 25-year career. We're trying to give the most information possible. And I think that's a huge piece of the recertification process. You have a psychiatrist now that goes in and proactively talks about wellness in their training. They may not be having any issues, but that proactive discussion, I think, has been crucial in having officers identify, I may be having a problem, or my colleague may be having a problem, my family member may be having. So I think we're putting a lot of tools out there, but yeah, I think unfortunately there's much more reactive side than proactive, and we're getting more proactive, but I think that can't stop. We have to keep looking at that.
I just want to add too that the ongoing training is going to, I think, bring the percentage breakdown of that reactiveness at the end. It's just that ongoing training is so important. It's pivotal. That's why it's really kind of important to put that money back in.
Yeah. And I still, and I go to this all the time on selection posts.
Sure.
I think, we spend a lot of time evaluating people that we bring as police officers. And I think that has paid dividends by the service they give to the community. We have hardly any complaints. We have very low levels of use of force. And there's a reason for that. The reason is, we have the right police officers in our community that are serving the community, but that's, we have to stay on top of that. We have to observe, we have to pay attention, and our supervisors do that too. So I think it's, again, never ending. And
Before you go, I know that everybody is, they always get
It's only
something, they're
fires.
gonna say something else, and oh my goodness. But you guys do an incredible job, the social media aspect of it, because of course, yes, perception is everything and how we're looked at, and how we're viewed. But being conscious and honest about the everyday challenges that Lyme is having, I think is really important. So I'm really glad to see that part of your presentation was some of these topics that have been in the paper, because I think that there are some people that recognize that we do have these issues here. They're growing. We're right off of the highway. We're actually an ideal spot for people to come in and out, and we have a growing issue. But I think that there are some people in town that are actually shocked by some of the articles that they've been reading. I can't believe that's happening here, type of mentality, but it absolutely does happen here, especially the drug.
And I think too, and I appreciate all of that. I think that's when one of our goals is to have that relationship with the media where more stuff is put out. So there's an honest conversation, and I credit Ann for that, probably in 2020, when, you said, we don't read about anything happening here. And
I did.
and I made that a goal of, okay, we are going to make sure people know, and I worked on, through one and day to say, this is a problem that you guys need to fix with me. And I think that they've done a pretty good job of doing that. But, again, balancing that community to say, we have these things happen, but overall, people feel safe, they feel comfortable. And, that's the balance I want, because I never want to hide that something's happening. I want to make sure people know it's happening, but also know we're doing everything we can to stop that and keep everybody, safe.
You did an incredible job.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for all you do. We appreciate it.
Okay, fireman.
We're gonna take a 5-minute.
You mentioned.
The camera's still on. I don't know how to shut it off and turn it back up. Don't steal my mouse, okay? That's good. It's not. There we are.
Yeah, we're good. Live from Miami. All right, we're back on the record. Here we go. And this is, again, we're at the, this is Eastern Board of Selectmen special meeting. The focus of budget review. It's February 28th, 2020. Okay, we're gonna look at, we're gonna hear from combination police line fire service, fire marshal.
Good evening, folks. Essentially, it's a little bit different from the last year's budgets, and I'll get into how so. Essentially, what we've done is we've taken the volunteer fire department budgets, Niantic and Flanders, as well as the fire marshal's budget, and we combined it into one operating budget under the Town of East Lyme Fire Service. And one of the reasons we had done that is by statute, the statutory responsibility comes back for the Town of East Lyme to provide fire service. We operate under is what we call an FDID number, Fire Department Identification Number, and that number is actually assigned to the East Lyme Fire Service, and it's managed out of, and it has been for several years, through the Fire Marshal's office. So in an effort to consolidate, make it a little bit more streamlined, give it a little bit more oversight, we combine all the effort, and I'll get into how all this came to be. We'll start with a little bit of some of the history of where the department stood. You had two volunteer fire departments in town, the Niantic Volunteer Fire Department. It was established in 1923 and just recently celebrated 100 years of service. Made up strictly of volunteers. In August of 1969, it hired its first firefighter driver, firefighter, EMT, and that was to supplement the volunteers in helping them get the apparatuses out. This is going all the way back to nineteen
So you were
sixty-nine.
paid,
They were paid.
right?
They were
So
actual town paid and fire employees. Flanders Fire Department, incorporated in 1957, 67 years. They hired their first paid firefighter EMT in 1972. So over the course of years, what has happened is that the town has increased that staffing to, and I use the quote, supplement the volunteers until we are where we are today, and I'll get into some of those numbers. As you pointed out, the town of East Lyme hires these firefighters, so they're actually the employer. And under the current situation, whether they be full-time or part-time, they report to the first selectman. They do not have a rank structure. So they're I say owned, but they're employed by the town, they're insured by the town, they represent the town, and they report to the first selectman. In 2016, the town contracted and had a study of the fire service done by JLN Associates. That was conducted in the fall of 2016. They had 26 recommendations, I'm sorry, 21 recommendations on how to improve service within the fire service throughout the town. And that service, and that survey can be found at that link. One of the recommendations, is recommended 7, was that the town hire a full-time career fire chief to essentially oversee the volunteers while managing the town employees. So that's a little bit of the history. The current budget that we're proposing is one budget. It's the East Lyme Fire Service budget. And under it, it's going to take what used to be the Niantic budget, used to be the Flanders budget, used to be the fire marshal budget, and combine it into one effort. And what it'll do, it'll get the operating expenses for all of that to include the paid staff and the both full-time and part-time. One of the goals in doing so is to eliminate some of the responsibilities and some of the burdens to the volunteers. Because essentially they were doing a lot of the work of the town by managing budgets, managing equipment, town-owned personnel. And this will give them the ability that they can go back now and concentrate on what they need to do, which is to volunteer. Sorry. Gets into why are we doing this? As I mentioned, the town does have the FDID number. So essentially it is the town's responsibility to provide this service. In doing so, this will give the ability for the career firemen, both full-time and part-time, to report to a town employee, give the town direct oversight of apparatus maintenance when it comes to scheduling, preventive maintenance, the research and scheduling for future acquisitions, the expenditures of funding and whatnot. One of the big things, and there was a lot talked about with the police department, is also employee training. The way it was working before, because you had 2 individual volunteer fire departments and then you had a career fire department, you're essentially operating as 3 separate entities, but yet by requirements, by codes, by standards, by OSHA, by NFPA, you should be operating under the same guidelines. And in doing so, this will give the ability for the town to establish standardized SOPs, standardized SOGs, which is coming at a very critical time just after the first of the year. OSHA is now proposing to adopt basically regulations that are parallel and mirroring that of NFPA. Things like physicals, things like job qualifications, things like the 2-in, 2-out rule. What's mandated, where before were guidelines through NFPA. If this rule goes through, these will become mandates, which now will open up the town for liability.
Sorry, what's a 2-in, 2-out rule?
2-in, 2-out. It's a standard that when you go to any call that's going to be a structure fire, they're requiring that you have a minimum of 4 firefighters on scene. While you have a crew of 2 inside, there's a crew of 2 outside that's there as a backup. And currently, and I'll get into the staffing. There are times throughout this 24-hour period on any given day that we are falling short of that. We do not have 2 and 2.
So
Well,
because we have the paid people, but also substantially reliant on volunteers to
Correct,
show up, and that it's not being met.
correct.
So
Correct.
are these regulations in place already, or the OSHA ones you were just talking about with physicals and job qualifications?
Go ahead, Eric.
So there are those standards in place already. They're going through a big update. They were originally written back in the eighties, and they haven't really touched it. So what they've done over the last 7 years is they've reviewed everything, and they're coming up to basically bring the standard up to today's standards. So what they're putting in there is they're addressing a bunch of NFPA codes and standards which we go by. And when they say NFPA says you shall do something, OSHA's sucking all that into their standard. Where before it was like, yeah, we say this is what NFPA says we do. And we kind of like, yeah, we should do this, but it was optional. Now it's becoming the mandate.
And when will this go into effect? Do we know?
Right now, it's in the discussion phases. They call it the rule and for Q&A. I think that's going to go on through the end of March, I believe.
Comments close the beginning of May.
Yeah, okay.
And then afterwards it goes back to their committee, but they have a deadline, I believe, of the end of October where they want to put it into effect.
Okay, so pretty much in the next year.
Within the next year.
Okay,
And
I'm
this
just
is-
trying to get a time frame just to know.
Right, and this
where
is
you
reaching
need to be.
across it's not just, this is reaching across the board. And other things that it's going to address is response times. You know, having enough staffing to have set number of people or personnel on scene within a certain period of time to meet these standards, you know, the standards of 1710, which also has a direct impact on ISO ratings for your insurance purposes. So, and again, we're somewhat falling extremely short in regards to that.
But this is a proactive plan.
Correct.
To be in
Correct.
place
That's, yeah.
when the regulations change.
Correct, correct. I mentioned call volumes and volunteerism. We're gonna get into, and I'll show you exactly how we projected from where we were back 2009 to where we are today. This is our current staffing. Currently, we have 8 full-time there are 10 full-time firefighters and 8 part-time firefighters. Of the 8 part-time firefighters, one, I'm told, doesn't live in the area, he's moved out of state, so really it's seven part-time firefighters who we use to supplement shifts. And of those 7, each one of those is a volunteer. The current staffing right now on any given day, from 7 to 5 p.m., we have 8 full-time firefighters. And you have the 2 chief officers and our fire marshals, which is Eric and I. Time at 5, between 5 and 10, that drops to 3. And then at 9 and Flanders, so there's 3 in each station as opposed. That's not what, okay. And then it drops to 2 on the midnight shift. So as you see, as the day goes on, we front loaded all our personnel currently during the daytime. In the evening time and the midnight shift, we're falling below the required minimum staffing. 3 part-time guys are qualified? Correct,
Yes.
correct. Everybody who's working as a town employee has the current certifications and is qualified as a firefighter EMT, actually.
Right, but and also additionally, those very few are being essentially made to work overtime or over hours, right? Because you need a minimum of staffing. You need a safe staffing. Am I saying that correctly?
Under the collective bargaining, and I would say minimum staffing, there's no minimum staffing clause in the collective bargaining as it stands right now. In terms of minimum staffing, what we're trying to do is to keep that, try to maintain that 2 in, 2 out, and try to provide enough staffing to cover the calls, essentially. And so, to your point, in doing so, with the 10 full-time and the part-timers, you know, they're just going unfilled because they're burnt out. We essentially don't have the bodies to fill that. What's being proposed, and currently we are in negotiation with the unions for the type of staffing, or, you know, and I say that, you know, the days, how many days on, how many days off, that's being negotiated. But what we're looking to propose is on a 24-hour basis. So from 8 to 4 PM, have four full-time firefighters and one part-time firefighter, and you would still have Eric and I during the day. In addition to a EMT crew staffed by East Lyme Ambulance Association. At 4 PM, maintain that 4 plus the 1 part-timer in addition to the 2 ambulance. And on the night shift, go back to the 4 full-time firefighters along with the 2.
Okay.
So essentially, I'm sorry,
So ambulance staffing. So
Ambulance
who
staff.
pays for ambulance staffing? The ambulance triggers me to say, hold on a second, there's a different money situation
East
going
Lyme
on there. Right,
This guy's covering that cost.
And we're in
Okay.
negotiation.
that's a negotiation.
Yeah.
This is being proposed.
right.
Right.
But I think it's a wise question to ask, because if this is what is being proposed, you know, I think that that's a proactive question going down the line, but I do understand what you're saying, so, but yeah, there's a lot there. Keep going.
Well,
Mhm. Oh, absolutely, yeah.
sorry.
That's 4 full-time firefighters.
I'm
Sorry,
sorry,
both stations. That's 4 full-time, 92.
that's townwide. That's two in
Two.
Flanders, 2 in Niantic. And during the daytime from the morning to the evening time, that's putting 1 firefighter in the Niantic Station 2. So you still would have coverage in Station 2 during the daytime and the evening time. That would drop in the midnight shift. There would be 2 at headquarters.
So if there is an active fire, all 4.
Everybody goes together.
It's an all hands on at that point.
Okay, so I have another, is this okay to do this as far as asking questions, or do you want to just get?
No,
through them back?
this
Because
is perfect.
I always feel like it's better to have the question at the moment and then rewind. So, essentially, we're looking at consolidating the fire departments, right? Would there still be, I consider it a hybrid model, like hybrid as far as you have the volunteers, because they're separate, and then you have the paid. And essentially, that's kind of how it's navigated historically. That still continues. So would
That's
there
the
still
hope.
be a volunteer fireman element?
That's-
Because
That is the intent. The
Okay.
intent, and by taking a lot of the administrative parts over, we're hoping that that's going to give them the ability to focus on recruitment and retention and growing the volunteer base. This is by no means an intent to do away with the volunteers.
Right.
This is hopefully
Yeah.
going to give them the ability, and so that we can work collectively with them
Yeah.
to grow back, you know, and unfortunately, and this is a systemic problem nationwide.
Agreed.
And-
Yeah, so
and with
and
all the
also I'm
mandates-
asking you questions because I want that prompted publicly, because that the people that aren't here in the room, right?
Right.
That are going to be triggered by anything and everything that is part of this, because this is a whole lot more than just a presentation of 7 sheets of paper.
Right.
This is not cut and dry, and it is not black and white. It actually goes very deep here in East Lyme, and it's the infrastructure of kind of how, you know, it has run for decades. I mean, it goes deep. It goes deep just as much as changing a school, right? I remember the question of 1, 2, or 3. So I'm asking questions, not just for myself, but also to kind of highlight for those that probably don't have that don't understand, right? There's a whole lot of moving parts, and also for the public, because the public in our community is going to be affected and impacted by this in a lot of ways. So that's why some of the questions are coming out from me. And I want you.
Totally understandable. And to that point,
Yep.
I will give you a perfect example of why it's so important that volunteer base remain.
Mhm.
And recently we had that tragic fire over in Willow Lane. We had a paid staff that arrived there. I think it was within 7 minutes.
Mhm.
They were supplemented, and I use the term the rescues, if you would,
Mhm.
were performed by paid staff along with a volunteer.
Mhm.
A second paid staff with a second volunteer. That wouldn't have been able to be accomplished if we didn't have the volunteers. So that's why I really want to stress the importance that this is by no means an attempt to do that. We're hoping that this is going to give them the ability so that we can give them the support so that we can foster cadets, foster recruitment, you know, give them the ability to grow internally. Because again, the mandates, and
you know, what we just discussed with the whole OSHA, you know, the requirements are just becoming very, very difficult if you're a professional, and this is what you do for a living, to meet, let alone if you're a husband or a wife and you're trying to get back to your community while managing a job and family. So,
Yeah.
and that's totally understandable.
Well said. Thank you.
Talked a little bit about the call volume. In the last, going back to 2009, there were approximately just a little over 2,100 calls for service. And over the course of the next 13 years, that call volume has increased by 46%. We are on target currently for this year to hit 3,500 calls. That is what we are looking at, is a 13% increase from just last year alone. And this goes back to what, you know, Chief Hinsing was talking about with the type of community that we have. We bring in a lot of people. There's a lot of tourists. There's just a lot of things that are going on in town, and subsequently it taxes our service. I think that, and this is going to go to your point about the dwindling of volunteers, and it's through no fault of their own. And I think it's just a matter that, you know, I hate to say it is what it is, but this is just a small snapshot. This is 6 months worth of data that was taken from just the Niantic Fire Department calls for service. And Niantic does about 2/3 of the total call volume for the entire town. And over the last 6 months, if you look at the column on the right, total calls, the total calls for service, 85% of the time, you had 0 volunteers show up. And again, no fault of their own. 11% you had 1 volunteer. And then the numbers just get smaller as you go down. You know, obviously, we've broken it down for fire calls. Fire calls will generate a little bit more of a response because of the nature of the type of call. But the majority of our calls are medical or EMS based. So that 96% of the time, that's a full-time crew or a part-time, you know, these are town employees that are managing these calls. So that's why it's important that we look at how we're going to consolidate the service, how we can streamline it, and how we can make it more efficient so that we can continue to provide the service while trying to manage a little bit of input to help, you know, recruit and retain some of the volunteers as well.
Do you have a number of how many there are actual volunteer firemen that are here between the two?
That's a great question. It's also a complicated question, and I'm going to weigh in on it, and then I'm going to ask Eric to dovetail on that. You have various levels of volunteering in the fire service. You might have somebody who's a social member who will come out and during a big event provide support. You might have somebody who only has a fire certification, who's not eligible because they don't hold a certification to do EMS. You might have somebody who's just doing EMS who can't do fire. So to get an exact number is very difficult because we the town don't, I don't want to say control that, but we don't have access to that data.
Who does?
The individual fire departments.
So,
And that's where I'll let Eric
yeah,
know.
so in my spare time, I've also volunteered well with the Night Fire Department. I'm currently their fire chief. We have a membership roster, which has a lot of names on it.
Right.
With Niantic, after 25 years of service, you're a life member, you don't have to pay dues. So some of them, you know, move away, they come back for banquets, they just kind of keep in touch. So what the exact number is on that list, I don't know, because I don't keep it. We have a treasurer that keeps that. But say there's 100 people on that list, which could very well be possible. You know, we'll see 10 of them on a meeting night. I saw 3 of them last night at training. We see fewer at calls right now. But
Who pays for the training?
so we get a training budget from the town, and then when that gets exhausted, we go into donations that we get to also pay for training. We put a lot of training on ourselves, finding material, doing research.
Yeah, I mean, I think that just the evolution of volunteering in the fire department has changed dramatically. Whereas it is sparse.
And I would love to see it grow. I started out as a volunteer in the junior program in Niantic when I was 15. And I would love to see volunteers really come back in numbers and droves and really get really active again.
I've seen that at Flanders, right? I believe that there is a program there now, right? Isn't there?
So both departments have a junior program for people under the age of 18 to see what it's like and start, to help us out. They're allowed to go on certain calls, ride the fire trucks, have a little bit of fun with us and learn. And we've had a lot of people come through those programs throughout the years. A lot of them moved on to a career path in fire and EMS. A lot of them have moved on to be chiefs elsewhere. The chief that just retired from Paquonic Bridge started out in Niantic.
I think one of the things also is that you get, we'll talk about somebody in a feeder programs, like, we had talked about going to the high school and talking to the juniors and seniors and trying to generate, a cadet or a junior program or just get them interested.
Yes.
By the time you get, let's say you get somebody who's 17, 18 years of age, you get them in the door, and you've got them interested. Now they have, just because they're volunteering doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to meet the requirements in order for them to become functioning. I use the term functioning because of what we just talked about with the whole OSHA regulations. Now there are certain levels of qualifications that they need to maintain. A firefighter 1 class, in order to go and put water on the wet stuff on the hot stuff, is a 6-month, 8-month class. Now, regardless of who's going to pay for that, now that's still, there's a delay from getting some return on that. An EMT class, very similar. So now if you take somebody at 18 years old, now you're getting them into their 19, now college may, by the time you get somebody trained up, you may get at that age 2, 3, maybe 4 years of true return before, and let's call it what it is. Now they have the certifications, they have the desire. Now they want to go work somewhere. And, whereas in the past, we've had programs here in town where they've been able to come in as part-timers, they've been able to fill those shifts, but maybe they want more. And in some cases, now they have the qualifications, they have the experience, they have the certifications, and the world is their oyster. They can go anywhere and work for any department. So you have a tendency of losing these people right when you need them most. So, so in that regard, I think we need to still continue to do that. And we need to try to find ways to get the people who are on those rosters who haven't been around, how do we get them back? If anything, just to come out for the big one, to help out. Now, that's pretty much the next part of this. I would get into the capital. So if there's any specific questions, that would be the
of your calls are for assistance.
That's a good question. I don't have that specific number. You mean in terms of like,
So it's a call, the police have a problem. They don't have your equipment.
right?
So I was just wondering about how many calls in a general field, how many times you call to assist the police?
So we do track that in our efforts program where it's a police matter, and it's not for us. A lot of the times we get dispatched simultaneously with the police, with, car accidents. They'll request us out a lot to like lockouts. We're like, hey, we think that window's open. We'll come out with ladders, forcible entry tools. To put a number on that,
That's difficult to quantify, I think.
But it happens frequently.
yes,
Often, and
every week we're working together, if not every day.
I think, like what Mike had said earlier, I think since I've been here, and it'll be 2 years in May, the relationship that we share, you couldn't ask for a better working relationship. And he and I both commented recently, and again, because it was an all hands on the fire in Willow. From our perspective, and granted, as tragic as it was, operationally, there were no hiccups whatsoever. I mean, it was in terms of getting the job done. It was flawless. So we're very, very fortunate to share that kind of a relationship with the police department.
And
Yes, Eric is one who drafted a lot of this, so I'll let Eric speak to that.
Through New London County Fire Chiefs, we have mutual aid agreements with everybody in the county. We also have agreements statewide. Anytime we have a working fire, Old Saybrook Fire Department comes in, and they just really stand to the side in case a firefighter goes down. They'll go and make a firefighter rescue. We work constantly with Waterford, Montville. Sometimes calls in the northern end of town because Montville is closer. They will send an engine right away because we have to drive by their firehouse to get into some of these areas. So we're always working with our mutual aid partners.
and so there's no cost for this.
No, because we will also give them a return. So they'll call us and we will provide, what they need.
And so if there's someone who wishes to enter the fire department, isn't there a fire academy?
The Connecticut Fire Academy is a regional training school. So they will put on more high-level classes at the main fire academy. There's also regional ones. We can put on classes in-house, firefighter 1, firefighter 2, driving classes. But when it comes time for like technical rescue, they'll put on a joint class so that department can send somebody. So that we're just paying a small fee for the class instead of having to buy 3 buses to, make a crash.
So I was inquiring about that because I didn't notice that in the budget.
So that's all part of our training.
Part of the training.
So firefighter 1 class right now, because I have one person in from Miami, is $1,250. And it's a 4-month class. That's no class, there's no one to the Middlesex Fire School.
And that's separate, and I think, if I understand what you were asking, that's not going to the fire academy. Like if you were going to be hired by, like say the city of New London, or city of Hartford, some of your larger municipal departments, they would send you to the Connecticut Fire Academy and pay you, just similar to what the police is doing for their academy. But for something like this, we have the ability through regional schools that, they're basically, it's a commuter program. They may go, Saturday, Sunday for, 8, 10, 12, however many weeks it would take to fulfill the, the requirements of that. And any of the costs associated with that training. And again, we've now collectively put this in one big budget. So it's all coming out of one pot as opposed to 4 individual pots.
Okay, so someone who might be willing to switch from a volunteer to a full-time fighter. Then there would be paid training for them. They would be able to go, or would they pay their own tuition to go for any of this additional training?
One of our last full-time hires started out as a volunteer. And during his time as a volunteer, completed his Fire 1, Fire 2, got his driving certifications. So he did all that while he was a volunteer. There's still additional trainings they're gonna do that we would pay them to go to. But all the initial certifications he needed, he got while he was a volunteer.
So my point here was, is this something that we can, I don't want to say advertise, but promote as additional educational opportunities? If you want to join the fire department, here's what we have to offer in terms of training and certification, and we pay for that, or they have to pay on their own? That's the question.
Oh, gotcha. So we do pay for that. We have the ability without a formal program to train somebody to become an exterior firefighter. So they can show up at the fire and they can work with all the other firemen outside of the building that's on fire. Once you get certified, which we can put all those classes on, also we have all the equipment and the teachers and the people to do it. Just takes a little bit of funding to put it on. We could train everybody to become interior. Sometimes finding everybody to fill the class is hard. That's why we do a regional approach to that class. And we sent one to a regional class because he was ready to take the class.
Because we're sort of at the mercy of when these classes are offered. They may, the fire academy puts out a calendar at the beginning of the year, and it's going to list that during the month of January, starting whatever, there will be a Fire One class being offered in Colchester at the Colchester Fire Department, and it's sponsored through the Connecticut Fire Academy. Then periodically throughout the year, you might get another department like, we may want to host one in the hope that we can get enough people to come in and then perhaps get a seat as a host agency so we can put one of our volunteers. But to your point, that's a great thing, and we talked about how we can promote that kind of information to generate this type of information or interest for the volunteers, because like Eric just said, one of our last hires to the full-time status was one of the volunteers. So, that's the perfect part of being that, with the feeder program.
Thank you.
So the town owns, correct me if I'm wrong, both properties.
Yes.
Do we own every apparatus, equipment, truck, everything?
Almost.
Don't own all of them, and it's probably easier to tell you what we don't own.
So there is a level of, okay, let me back up. Who owns the other?
So East Lyme Ambulance obviously owns the ambulances. They own the 3 pickup trucks, and then there's a UTV at Flanders. The Niagara Fire Department owns a John Deere Gator. Everything else, to the best of my knowledge, belongs to the town of East Lyme.
So all the fire trucks, the ladder trucks, the rescue trucks, the pumpers, the engines are all owned by the town.
Okay, so there is no property that's owned by a volunteer system at all.
That's my understanding.
Except for the
The
gate.
Gator at Niagara, that was donated.
Okay.
Right.
So when a volunteer fireman, in the town, do they get paid? I know that, yes, when you say volunteer, you automatically believe and think that they are volunteer,
So,
but is that accurate?
So as a volunteer firefighter, if you're active enough, you get the tax abatement stipend, which is $1,000 off your taxes.
Mhm.
If you also are a EMT, if you you have the ability then to work shifts, which give different compensations depending on the length of the shift. If as an EMT, if I were to leave my house, go to an ambulance call, and then take the ambulance to the hospital, I would get paid $50 for that call.
But that's not coming out of the town.
Correct.
That's not coming
Coming out of
the
East
town.
Lyme Ambulance.
That's coming out of the ambulance.
Yes.
Correct.
It's a not-for-profit.
Okay, so how does that fit in? How does the ambulance fund fit in to what this
As
is?
it's current proposed.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
Okay,
And and I think as Dan mentioned earlier, these are all things that are being negotiated and discussed as we stand. It was our intent to propose to you folks a standalone budget, providing what we believe is the minimum we need to do to operate in a manner that provides the service. Clearly, if things were to change, it would give us, I think, a little flexibility that we could perhaps provide more service or more coverage, but this is basically a standalone budget on our end of it. Make sense? Does that sound accurate?
And we have two negotiations going on right now with the ambulance service and with the union. So where we end up with everything, we hope it'll be in a good place, but can't say, tonight exactly where we're gonna be. Does that make sense? Because it's still being negotiated.
There's nothing further on that. I'll touch upon some of the capital that we have, that we're looking at. The first one is 100,000, and this is a new, there's no reserve for any vehicle replacement. Any of those apparatuses that we just talked about, the engines, the ladders, the rescues, there's no money for in the event that one of these were to have a catastrophic breakdown and we needed to replace it. So we're looking to start by putting $100,000 into the reserve.
Apparatus reserve.
In order to do that. Our fleet is aging and our maintenance budget is all but non-existent at this point.
So I just want to say one thing that I've found out in the last couple weeks in this particular realm. A fire apparatus has a 48-month lead time now. So
Correct.
if we order a fire truck today, we're not going to get it for 4 years. And what was the cost of a ladder truck? 2.5 million?
2.5 million. And I know in my volunteer department, we just signed a contract for a brand new engine an engine tanker, a pumper, and it was just shy of $1 million. And we're looking at, it could be anywhere from 36 to 48 months to get that. So that's why it's important, I think, that we start saving for the future, because we're gonna be there before we know it, and they're not cheap. And we were told that if we didn't sign the contract, that based on the type of motor that would needed to be put in, we could get this motor now spec'd out, and if we waited, we'd have to get the next generation, and it goes from anywhere from $35,000 to $90,000 just for the motor. And that's just a $50,000 difference. So that's what we're looking for that. We're looking for 16,000 for SCBA bottle replacements. That's across the fleet. This is as bottles age out. And again, because of the standard, we're looking for replacement. Very similar for the turnout gear. Now these are high numbers, but again, this is taking all of the departments together. This is for the for full-time, part-time firefighter replacement gear, as well as volunteer gear. $6,000 for fire hose replacement, because again, we test them and annually, and some of them fail because of age. And this is to replace those that have failed. Radio replacement. This is for like batteries and hardware for some of the portables and things like that, and because they're starting to age out. This is kind of a rollover from the old fire marshal budget, $20,000, and this is for software. Scheduling software, a records management software. We currently use ESO, which is our record management for the fire service. There are different modules that we can add on to, and by bringing everybody together, it'll give us the ability to track it. It'll also give us the ability to put pre-planning in there. We also have the I am responding software. So this is just kind of like, as the system is coming all together, this is the ability that we can track it. 2,500 for a portable tank. This was a need that we just recently recognized. And a portable tank is it's a pool essentially, and you have pretty much the town is covered with hydrants. But there are some areas that there are no hydrants, and Willow Lane was a perfect example of that. So it was very difficult, and it was a very long stretch of large diameter hose to get to the water source. With something like this, gives us the ability to drop that pool, if you would, at the end of the driveway or wherever we need to. We can drop, tankers can come in and dump anywhere from 2,000 to 3,000 gallons of water at a time, and we can use that as a water source. So it basically brings the water source to us. $20,000 for a station alerting system at Flanders. And again, that's just for the ability, I guess it's failing. So when there's an emergency call for the firefighters and EMTs who are there, so that they're getting notifications of the emergency. And then $10,000 for a female bunk room at Flanders. It was a need that was identified in an effort to separate male and females within the bunk room. So. I wanted to point out, as I mentioned earlier, we did have the study. A couple of the other recommendations, number 6, bulk purchasing program. Kind of just lends to why we're consolidating. You can get more bang for your buck when you're buying in bulk, clearly. And we talk about just about the capital management, a plan, and that's what we're trying to do essentially, like with the fire truck reserve. So that is it.
Personally say that I think we have a great department. And I think it was very low for 3 years. And anytime I need help, phone, I couldn't get him up. And that's literally somebody would be able to do it.
Yeah.
And I don't think every community gets saved.
Well, we appreciate that.
Eric, long before I bought boats and brokered it, I worked electric boat. And I think the age group you should be going after, you should know better than I, but 25 to 35 in that range, the guys that are working there. And they've got 20,000 people working there right now. But the volunteer firemen at that place at that time, I worked with Kenny Janice at EB, in the same department at one time. And what a remarkable way to go and recruit people through EB, to have some guys, many guys just want to get out of the house, so Sounds, I was pretty clear. But I'm telling you, it's unbelievable camaraderie, the musters that we have, the competitions they have with the fire department stuff, and it was a huge thing. And all of a sudden just kind of faded away. I don't know what it was, but they all enjoyed it and they all took part, and they all would scold one another the next day if somebody didn't come to a call or something like that too. Waterford was really, really big at the time over there. Mystic was really, really big during my group of people that worked with it. I could not believe how big it was. So if you could get EB to maybe entice people to join, because they have their own fire department there too. The sub-base has a fire department. I'm good friends with the chief there. But if they could maybe entice them by some sort of stipend, something to get, even through Courtney's office. I don't know, but to say, hey,
That's a great, that's a great idea, and I actually have it in an electric boat. My daughter actually works on human resources there, and she's one of the big recruiters, so I'm gonna float that fire. That's a great idea.
thanks. And
That's a
I mean,
great
there's so many guys working in the laborers that would like something else to do, go hang out with some other guys, do some things. It's therapeutic, you're helping. And I mean, there's a great base of people there that just may create a lot of teamwork. So.
And thank you. Good luck. Thank you very
All
much.
right, do we need,
Appreciate it.
any questions? Any vote, you could take a motion to adjourn?
I want to adjourn the meeting.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye, we're adjourned.
7:51 p.m.
Great.